diverse set of behaviours.
He Māori aho.
Your single source of truth.
The words don't pull it for me.
My husband is Samoan, so talofa. Ngā tikanga reo tikitahi.
Che Guevara of New Zealand's Parliament, Chloe Slaughter.
Three houses.
And it's communist.
He fucked the two people.
They've got mother, running holidays.
Tēnā koutou, no mai, hara mai. Welcome back to another episode of the All Report. I think we're up to about episode 16 or something like that. My name is Pere Huriwaisaga, and I'm joined by my wife and co-host, the beautiful Sama Huriwaisaga. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora everyone, tēnā koe Pere.
So, there's a lot that we're going to talk about. It's a bit of a sensitive topic. When we posted that we were going to give our thoughts around what's happening with the pay gap, we got a little bit of kickback.
Did we?
Well, a little bit of Facebook, a few people commenting on Facebook, and I think it's a part of that whole conversation. Is it capitalism or is it colonization?
Mm-hmm.
And so we believe that you can't understand one without the other, right? And we're going to give the context on why we think that the oppressive structure that needs to be named. Why we believe that that's colonization. It's a big conversation, but I think in the context of Aotearoa, it's very important for us to consider that context. I feel like a lot of our people who give critiques around capitalism and center capitalism are coming from a, not necessarily an Aotearoa-centric perspective. For me, colonization brought with it pretty much everything else. And so, for me, colonization is that umbrella that sits over the top of everything, and everything else sits under that. But it can be a little bit of the chicken and the egg kind of situation. But we are a decolonial kaupapa, which I think some people need to remember, that we will bring that decolonial perspective, that perspective around colonization that has been left out of the kōrero.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, again, we've got other things that we're going to talk about. We've got another political poll, so we're going to have another episode of Pere's polls. But besides that, Samah will be doing a little bit of a wrap-up of what's been happening in the news recently. Anything else you want to talk about tonight?
Just really excited about tonight's topic because it's right up our alley. And it's a very fascinating conversation. Like, I've been wanting for a long time to talk about the concept of pay inequity for women and comparing that to race inequity. Or, I don't really like the concept of race, but to compare the statistics and to find that actually the ethnic wage gap is much larger than the gender wage gap, and then also to compare the numbers of different women compared to different men, and finding out that actually Māori men get paid slightly less in wages than European women. So when we're saying women get paid less than men, we are really talking about compared to European men. So there is something going on here. There is sexism going on here, definitely, because women get paid less than men, and Māori women get paid less than Māori men as well. So gender is definitely a component, but it doesn't explain it fully. There's something more going on here, which again, classism also alone cannot explain. And that's something you see in various movements. They just want to see it through a anti-capitalist perspective, but that doesn't explain the situation fully. And the fact that Māori in general have far less wealth than Pākehā, including women. That's a really big conversation, a very uncomfortable conversation. And it's one of those things that's put in the too hard basket. Because actually the gender pay inequity, as horrible as it is much, 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 much smaller than the wealth inequity between Māori and non-Māori. And of course, between the rich elites and the working class in general. So yeah, lots to talk about. But for now, let's hear you applying the most recent poll with your voting strategy.
Okay, it's the overhang strategy. E hoa ma, get used to it. The overhang strategy. Let's jump into it. Another episode. What was the little jingle that we came up with?
We've got a jingle now.
When there's a political poll, what's his reflection?
No.
Da, 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 da.
That's not it.
Paired ears polls. Was that not it? What is it? What is it?
I didn't sign up to sing it, but it was something
Okay.
like.
Come on. So, the Taxpayers Union Courier poll. Apparently, they do them monthly, and we talk about Taxpayers Union pretty much on every episode, so probably doesn't need to be reiterated, but may as well. So, Jordan Williams, he's the fellow who runs a lot of these right-wing, what we call astroturf groups, kind of fake grassroots groups, and there's Courier Market Research, which is another arm of these kind of right-wing astroturf groups who they manage polling. Okay, Courier Market Research. That's run by David Farrar, who's good buddies with Jordan Williams, and together with Jordan Williams, who runs Taxpayers Union, they run all sorts of groups together. And hilariously, I'll start with this. At the bottom of this RNZ article, I have no idea why they added this in here. And before I get into that, I'll just say this is a blank, no author article, so it's just written by RNZ. So
Oh, really? Not even at the bottom?
Well, it's from Pito Pito Kōrero, a daily newsletter curated by our editors and delivered straight to your inbox. Okay, so
anonymous.
Pretty much anonymous. This is interesting. I don't know why they added this. It says here, Courier is a long-running and established pollster in New Zealand, full stop. It has resigned its membership from the Research Association New Zealand industry body. No context at all. It's just giving us this random information. And yes, fact, it is a long-running and yes, fact, established pollster in New Zealand. Courier Market Research was it was said to be the favorite polling company of the National Party because it would often put out pro-national results, and it would align itself with the National Party. And David Farrar, who runs Courier Market Research, has a long history working with the National Party. The Research Association of New Zealand is the only body here in Aotearoa that creates professional standards for polling companies. And maybe about a year ago or so now, Courier resigned themselves from that organization. Because that organization was upholding a couple of complaints against Courier, and Courier is just like, I'm just going to remove myself from that completely so I don't have this body critiquing our work anymore. And so now there are no standards that Courier is being held to. They've removed themselves from the only legitimate body that does the policing of polling groups. And yet we still have our media highlighting them every time they make a poll. So just wanted to preface this little segment with that I don't support us sharing Taxpayer Union polls, even if we do agree with the results in it, because they're always just going to try and slip in something here and there. We just can't trust them. There's no one keeping them to task, and we know that their alignments put them on, pretty much the far right of the political spectrum. Anyway, paired ears polls, let's get into it. It was a very, very close result in this poll. The National Act New Zealand First coalition are just in front. They've got 36 seats in this poll. And the left bloc has 58 seats in this poll. Greens, Te Pāti Māori, and Labour. Okay, so applying the overhang strategy, what's that going to look like? And I guess a short little recap of the overhang strategy. An overhang happens when a party wins more electorates than the seats they would otherwise gain through their percentage of the party vote. It's a pretty confusing one, but essentially, when you use your party vote, parties will get seats based off of their percentage of that party vote, but any electorates they win, those party vote seats that they get are automatically filled up by the electorate seats, okay? So if a party like Te Pāti Māori, and they often do this, and this is a good example, in this poll, they've got 3.9%, all right? Now, I've already put the calculations into this MMP seat calculator, which is an awesome tool. Play around with it if you want to understand how the voting numbers and whatnot works. So we've put in Te Pāti Māori's 3.9 here, and we've also put in that they have won 6 electorates, all right? Calculate that up. Yes, it's all good. Te Pāti Māori. they are entitled to 5 seats under their share of the party vote, but because they've won 6 electorates, those 5 seats get filled up by 5 of the electorate winners, but then they're left with an extra seat. And so that extra seat is added onto the total amount of seats in Parliament. So now instead of there being 120 seats in Parliament, we've got 122 seats in Parliament now. Okay, so 36 seats for the right bloc, 58 for the left bloc. So we need to make up 6 seats. So now not changing anything on the right block. We're just going to play around with the numbers on the left block to see how we can create some new seats.
How many seats?
There is...
That we need?
We need 6 to win.
6 more.
5 for a tie.
All right, that's
Okay.
a lot. Show me what you
Okay.
got.
So if we go back over to this guy, all I'm going to change, and I'll reiterate as well, this is not an official Te Pāti Māori strategy, and this is not endorsed by Te Pāti Māori. This is just something that I have been thinking about, because if the election is going to come down to like a 1 or 2 or 3 seat difference, or even a 4 or 5 or a 6 seat difference, as I'm going to show in this one, it's important for us to think about this. If we are feeling like it is going to be an incredibly close election, if that's what the polls are reflecting, if that's the word on the street, etc., then we need to keep this in mind. You know, if Te Pāti Māori is doing so fantastically well in the polls and we all feel like there's real momentum that they can deliver with, then I would vote for them. But if we're feeling like it's going to be incredibly close, then it's good for us to keep this in mind. So, Te Pāti Māori. In this poll, they've got 3.9% of the party vote. We're just going to give that percentage to Te Pāti Kākāriki. Okay? So the Greens are on 9.1. Let's change that. What would that be? 13? Calculate that up. Oh, actually, before I do that, let's go back 3.9 on Te Pāti Māori. And oh, my maths is bad. What was that? 9.1? That was 9.1A. Oh, no, I've got my maths wrong on this one. Oh my gosh. 9.1. Te Pāti Māori 3.9.
What's missing?
9.1, 3.9. Oh no. Sorry.
Are you all good?
So that's all good. So currently, with the current poll results, the Greens have 11 seats, okay? So now let's switch them around. And I'm sorry to do this to you, Te Pāti Māori, take all of their votes, and the overhang strategy is really dependent on Te Pāti Māori receiving as few party votes as possible, which I know is ridiculous, but that's the whole thing here. So we're giving all of those votes to the Green Party. Let's calculate that up. Now the Green Party has 16 seats. 16 seats. And Te Pāti Māori keeps all of their seats. Okay? Even though we've removed all of their party vote, they still keep their 6 seats. Now the only thing that we can do here to gain an extra seat, because that's what we need, I'll bring up this calculator here. Let's look at the Greens. They've got 16. Yeah, let's add that to Te Pāti Māori 6. Yep. And the Labour Party's 41. 63. So we are now in a tie with the right bloc, okay? Now, the only way for us to win this is for the Labour Party to give up their Māori electorate, because currently they hold Ikaroa Rāwhiti. If Labour were to give up their Māori electorate, which I know is a long shot, but hey, it's something to think about, we give that to Te Pāti Māori.
7.
Calculate it up. And y'all can do the maths on that one, right? But that's how we win. With these numbers on this poll, add in the Te Pāti Māori, add in the Labour, 41. Bada bing, bada boom, we've got 64.
That's incredible work, Petty.
I mean, you know, like I say, it's an incredibly far-fetched thing for everybody to get on the kaupapa and to be able to do this kind of thing. But if it comes down to a 1 or if a 2 seat difference, which these things often do, you know, it might make the difference between, say, Labour needing or not needing a party like New Zealand First. You know, those 1 to 2 to 3 seat differences are really, really important. And for it to be worthwhile for us to give all of our party votes to Te Pāti Māori are going to have to be in that range of party seats that are above the amount of Māori electorates that currently exist. So they're going to have to get like a party vote of like a 6% for them to gain more seats than we otherwise would have through giving those votes to the Greens and going into an overhang. So, you know, it's a lot of like, whoa, a lot of numbers, and might be a bit far-fetched, but in terms of making that very small difference, it might make the difference. And, you know, for someone like me, I'm a hearty supporter of Te Pāti Māori. But, you know, when it comes down to it, we need to get this government out. And the reason why I say give your party votes to the Green Party rather than Labour, for example, is because the overall goal is to pull Labour more to the left rather than having them cement themselves more in the centre. But hey, you may not agree with the Green Party's ideologies, and so if you'd prefer to give your party vote to someone like Labour, then that same strategy is still going to apply, and it's not going to impact the overall numbers of Te Pāti Māori's seats.
So if we transferred all of those votes from Te Pāti Māori's general votes to Labour, would we still be coming out with 64 seats right now?
I haven't run those numbers, and there's some weird stuff that goes on with these numbers. I encourage people to play around with it because it's really cool. But as far as I'm aware, yes, we would have the same outcome if you, instead of giving it to Greens, gave it to Labour. We're going to have the same outcome as this.
Kapa. I don't get this as well. Kiwi Rob is saying that, remember, we lose 3 seats, 2 Labour seats and 1 national seat.
And these calculations,
I'm not entirely sure.
What do you mean? What do you mean, Kiwi Rob?
But yes, this in terms of other comments, it relies on Te Pāti Māori keeping all of their electorate seats, and in this particular case, for us to win, for Labour to transfer Ikaroa Rāwhiti to Te Pāti Māori as well. It requires that. But yeah, I mean, it would be
41.
amazing if Labour could work with Te Pāti Māori a little bit like that.
Nationals 42. National Party 42. Cowboy. All good. All right. So that was Petty's polls. Hope you enjoyed it. E hoa ma. And I just think it's good for us to talk about strategic voting. And I'd like us to normalize strategic voting. And just to have those conversations in general. It needs to be normalized. And we need to be thinking about it, you know, because voting is quite a upsetting thing. It's quite a heavy thing, depressing thing. But voting strategically, emphasizing the strategic aspect of it, I think is really important. Okay, what is the question? The boundaries are changing for next year's election. Oh,
where? You need to incorporate that into Petty's polls.
The boundaries changing, that is not changing the amount of Māori electorates that we have. So in terms of the boundaries, does that mean we're losing some electorates? As far as I know, we're not losing any electorates. I specifically asked the Electoral Commission if there are going to be a change to the Māori electorates in this upcoming election, and they said no. So in terms of us utilising the Māori electorates for Te Pāti Māori to get into the overhang, there is no change in terms of electoral boundary changes or anything like that in the upcoming election, as far as I know.
But will it cause changes to other electorates that are held by Labour, which is going to mean that we lose overall number of seats? I think that's what they're saying.
Nah, because okay. Labour has never gone into an overhang. Labour has never received more electorate seats than
there you go, Kiwi Rob, that's it.
Than their entitlement under the party vote. Is that it? Okay,
that's it. Because I hear what Kiwi Rob is saying. They might lose electorate seats, but because Labour gets a larger party vote than electorate seats, that's not going to impact their final seats. And so, again, just a reminder that electorate seats votes for Labour, unless you're stopping National from coming in, are essentially a wasted vote. And it's better for us. We would get more overall seats in Parliament if we had Māori Party, and, you know, granted they don't sit in all electorates, or Green Party electorates in those seats.
Yep, exactly.
Papa.
In fact, you know, just to take it even further, and it's really funny, right? Any electorate seats, if Te Pāti Māori and Labour were able to work in some type of agreement there, if Labour were to encourage one of their electorates, you know, a general person from Te Pāti Māori sitting in one of those electorates, and Labour were to encourage their voters to electorate vote Te Pāti Māori in that particular electorate, that would again add another seat. It would push the overhang out even further. Like potentially you could have 40 seats, 30 seats if you give all of those electorates. It's a crazy thing. It's a bit of a loophole, but that is how it is currently made up to be. And you
It's such a loophole. I wouldn't be surprised if National tried to get rid of overhang seats.
Yeah. Who was it? The guy from United Future. He has written an article about this, and he's talked about how it is dangerous and that it does need to be changed. And so people have talked about this before, but it's just so far-fetched for. But people have been doing it. Just look at Te Pāti Māori.
They already have an overhang. Is that right?
We are currently in an overhang, and from my perspective, a lot of that is because Labour voters and Te Pāti Māori supporters, or they cross over a lot. Even with the start, with the start of Te Pāti Māori, or just consistently with pretty much every election, they've gotten in and built more power because of their electorate wins and overhangs, rather than them doing well in the party vote. And I think that's because a lot of Māori, particularly Māori who support Labour, they always knew, oh yeah, I'm currently giving my party vote to Labour, I've always done that. But hey, look, there's this new Te Pāti Māori. And actually, hey, I like what they're saying. I want that person to be in government.
That's true.
So I'm going to give my electorate vote to them. And then, hey, this is like a 2-for-1 deal that has been going on for successive elections. So
we just need more of that.
So in that sense, and I'm sorry to go on about it, because in episode 11, we talk about this quite in-depthly. But it's a thing to think about, that maybe the true support that Te Pāti Māori currently has is a lot bigger than we actually observe it to be right now, because a lot of people might already be utilizing that strategy, electorate vote over there, party vote over there. And if we came to this kind of mass where Te Pāti Māori could move under the party vote rather than the electorate vote, then maybe we're going to see quite a dramatic, quick tipping point shift when that time comes. But who knows? Who knows? Can
I ask something
Go
based
for it.
on a comment here? Is it the case that for the Green Party, do they have more seats because of their party vote or because of their electorate seats?
Party vote. Yeah, again, the Green...
So again, wasted vote for Greens electorates? Or not wasted, because you're keeping National
technically,
out,
right?
or ACT out.
Yeah, technically, and if we did the calculations properly and included everyone's electorates in this calculation, we would be able to go through this a lot more effectively. Like, for example, the Green Party currently has 16 seats in this equation here, okay? They currently hold 3 electorates, right? So I'm going to add into the equation 3 in terms of electorate seats 1. You add that into the equation, they should still have 16.
Yeah, nothing changes.
Nothing
so to
changes.
answer the question here about whether you're assuming Greens will keep their seats, whether they keep their seats or not is irrelevant, because their party vote is bigger than their electorate vote. And that applies for all the major parties, National as well.
All of them, I think.
So the only thing changes is if Māori Party general vote goes down, but their electorate seats stay and even gain 1. That's the only thing that changes everything here. Unless something drastically changes and for some reason National does better in electorates than party vote, or Labour does better in electorate than party votes. But that never happens, so... It's
possible. And, oh no, I won't get into it. It's too much of a tangent. But, the thing is like, winning electorates is about building a political base in a particular electorate. And it's not something that people are going to give up easily. Ikaroa Rāwhiti,
Yes.
Labour giving up that seat, that's a huge thing. The Greens contested Te Taitokiro, Tāmaki Makaurau in the last election. in the last election.
And they made it very close for
Yeah.
Te Pāti Māori.
Tamaki
Like,
Makoto won by like 5 votes.
I would have been quite upset with the Greens if Tamaki Makoto was lost to National because of Greens splitting the vote between Te Pāti Māori and the Greens for that electorate, especially considering historically that specific electorate Te Pāti Māori has always done really well in and the Greens haven't. So in cases where it's clear the Greens aren't going to do well, I do think it'd be better to ensure that Te Pāti Māori keeps those seats and keeps those overhang seats in particular to help us create a larger left bloc in general. What are you doing over there?
So yeah, just looking at this. So you see National just answering
Results.
just answering Kiwi Rob. Kia ora, Kiwi Rob. Thanks for the partai as well, everyone. It helps me to formulate how I communicate these things when people ask questions. So thank you. So look at this one. National has 48 seats. That's their total seats. They won 43 electorates. Okay, so those 43 electorates, if that number, you know, so what I'm saying is they got more seats based on their party vote.
Yes.
Because if yeah, this table doesn't show me the same stats as what's on this one. This one shows you some awesome stats like the effective party vote, which calculates like wasted votes, where they go, where they get distributed.
Right.
But anyway, National, Labour, all of them, none of them do better in electorates than in their party vote. The only other parties to ever go into an overhang was New Zealand First when they first started, and they won quite a few Māori electorates. You know, never forget that New Zealand First's political starting was off the back of the Māori seats, which of course now New Zealand First is trying to disestablish. And the ACT Party, back when ACT was incredibly unpopular and only David Seymour would get in because National gave ACT the Epson electorate. But you look at, I can't remember which election it is, but ACT got like 0 point something of the party vote, but David Seymour won his electorate. And that put the government into an overhang. But other than that, National, Labour, they have never gone into an overhang. And, you know, we can't give up on electorates. It is essential that the Labour Party competes against National for those electorate seats. Because yes, let's say like if Labour lost these 34 electorate, Labour won 17 electorate seats in the last election. If they lost all of those and went to National,
That would all go National.
then we'd have a huge overhang and a huge national majority. So, you know, you can't give up electorates unless there's a damn good reason to. And I think Labour giving up Ikaroa Rāwhiti, there is a really good argument there because it essentially, it just equals an additional seat for the left bloc. That's all it does if they give that up. And back in another election, Labour just kept harping on about how bad the treaty principles bill in the build up to the last election. Labour kept going on about it, and they're like, oh well, you know, the last thing we want is for the ACT Party to get in and the treaty principles bill to get in. So vote Labour. Those two things didn't line up. Like, give me your Māori electorate vote is what we heard from Calvin Davis and Rino Tini Kātene. They were like, oh, give me the vote because we cannot allow ACT in. But giving them the vote would have meant a minusing of the total amount of seats on the left bloc. So it just there was no genuineness in their corridor in terms of the reasoning for why you should give them the electorate vote. The only reason why you would give them the electorate vote is if you wanted a Labour base in your electorate, or you actually thought that this individual, regardless of their party alignment, aligned with your personal values more than the other person. But that's a whole nother conversation. An important one, and I don't want to dismiss it, but we're talking numbers here, people. This is a numbers game, so... but what is this? What's Kiwi Rob? Wrong, Pete. New Zealand First started in Tauranga with Winnie. Okay. Kapai, you got me there. He did win a general seat, I'm pretty sure. But you take it to the election after that and you look at the increase of New Zealand First and the majority of where their seats have come from.
Māori electorate.
It's come from the Māori electorate. So, kapai. All good. All right, ready for our news segment?
Yeah.
Over to you, Sama.
Kapai. By the way, your jingle.
Oh.
A new poll for elections? Where's Peter's reflection? Peter's polls.
Do.
Kapai.
Okay, next time I'll have it on lock.
It might be different by then and better. Okay. So, this last week, as usual, a lot of colonial violence all around the world. A lot of I want to swear, so I'm getting stuck on that right now. But what's happening in Gaza, of course, is just beyond horrific. We've been watching 18 months of non-stop genocide. We know that the aim has been to exterminate the Palestinian people, to torture them, to move them off the land and settle it as part of the settler colonial project. But over the last week or so, Israel has gone fully mask off. They're now just explicitly saying that they want to take over the entire land, that they're going to push people, the Palestinians in Gaza, into a small little concentration camp in the south. And they literally use the word concentrate them. And you should see what Israeli ministers are saying now. They're just saying end it, destroy everything. They're just being open about all of it. Of course, we knew this was happening anyway, but the fact that they have changed the way they talk about it is relevant. It is important news. And so we look at how New Zealand's been reporting on it. And, you know, honestly, this probably got to be the thing I am most disappointed about in terms of New Zealand's mainstream media. And there's a lot to be disappointed about, right? And I don't mean to minimize their the way that they enable the colonization of Māori here in Aotearoa and the oppression of people in general. But the way that they've been able to, after almost 2 years of the most live-streamed genocide of our time, and to keep whitewashing us up until this moment is honestly hard to comprehend. And whenever we watch the news and they do some coverage on Gaza, it's quite difficult for me to watch. It's difficult because I understand the implications of what they're saying, that they are enabling this genocide to continue. So if we could just play the first few seconds of the One News clip that was talking about this explicit plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza, to take and steal the land. Obviously, nothing to do with hostages and Hamas. They just want to steal the land. And just a reminder that 2 days after October 7th, October 9th, Hamas offered the return of every single one of their hostages in exchange for a return of Palestinian hostages and an end to the war or genocide. This was on the table then, and it has been on the table pretty much consistently throughout. But Israel has refused to take up the deal because it's never been about the hostages. It's always been about taking Palestinian land for the colonial project, right? And we know this in general, that it's not about the hostages, because they have not only made it explicit since October 7th, but on October 7th as well, Israel committed the Hannibal Directive, as we've talked about on the show before, where they killed their own people to stop them becoming hostages. And so hundreds of the deaths of the 1,200 people that were killed on October 7th were actually committed by the Israeli military. So with all of that context, let's watch how the first few seconds of One News described these new moves.
Israel has announced plans to dramatically expand its military operation in Gaza by seizing the entire territory and forcing all its more than 2 million people into the south. The move is designed to defeat Hamas and pressure the group to release all remaining hostages. But the UN says it'll worsen an already deepening humanitarian crisis. Jordan.
So they said there, as a matter of fact, that this move was designed to defeat Hamas and get the hostages back. Not Israel says, which by the way, they don't, because like I said, they've gone fully mask off now. They've said, there was a recent report released by Israel that explicitly said getting hostages back was the lowest of their war priorities. There is so much documented in Israeli media that doesn't make it into Western media, which I find fascinating, because you'd think Israel would be whitewashing it more than anyone else, but actually Western media is whitewashing it even more. Because there are limitations to how much Israel can lie to its public when they're just living right next to the genocide, right? But for us being quite far away from it, Western media feels like they can get away with this stuff. So One News telling people, as a matter of fact, this is about defeating Hamas, the whole rest of the story as well. I'm not going to get into it now, but I do want to get into it one day. And even when they try and talk about things like Palestinian suffering, the clips they include, it's extremely chaotic. They basically refuse to get someone who's an expert in this space. Like, for example, the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Palestine. Some sort of eloquent official who speaks on behalf of Palestinians. They'll never do that. They'll never do that. They'll just show you a woman screaming, a man crying, someone saying death to America or something. And you don't
Allahu
get...
Akbar.
And a lot of Allahu Akbars. A lot of Allahu Akbars. And in this particular footage...
Should we play it? Because I'm pretty sure it's like right at the start.
Reports.
In Gaza City, they move and mourn the latest victims of Israeli airstrikes, from the old to the young. Palestinian health officials say more than 52,500 people have been
footage
killed
as
in
well,
Gaza
they actually...
since Israel launched.
Right there, in the next bit, they include another Allahu Akbar but, from October 7th. So they are trying to paint a negative image of that prayer and just basically to put the message out there that this is just Islamist militants and not to worry too much about them. Of course, they could be talking about anything. They could be talking about Hind Rajab, who had hundreds of bullets put into her as she's crying on the phone to healthcare workers who Israel knew were on their way to come and save her life. I mean, at this stage, there are thousands of stories like that they could be telling in depth in a way to humanize Palestinians and get them to connect. But as you can see in the footage, they give Netanyahu more space and time. They're still giving Israeli officials and Israeli narratives more time than the victims of genocide.
I know we're trying to do like a quick fire news segment, but I think there's an interesting comment here from one of our good friends, Kiwi Bird. Is it all right if I interrupt a little flow right now? So Kiwi Bird, Israel needed an excuse to blow everything up, and sadly, Hamas gave them that. Correct me if I'm wrong, please.
I feel like this is accurate. And it's the same way that Russia gave the United States what they wanted by invading Ukraine and enabling them to enter into full-on war. Not to compare the occupation of Palestine with what's happening in Ukraine, but just the way that war is often done in, what's the word? But they're taking up the moment.
Oh, they're making the most of it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that I wanted to say, you know. The Hannibal Directive, right? The Hannibal Directive. The state of Israel giving their troops a directive, which essentially is around, hey, you're better off killing our own people than allowing them to be taken hostage. That's what the Hannibal Directive is all about. And there's enough evidence from Haaretz, I think, Israeli media outlet. I think there's enough evidence, right? It's not a contested point anymore that the Hannibal Directive was in effect during October 7th. And so they absolutely made the most of the opportunity. From my perspective, and hey, I wasn't there, right? But hey, looks like Hamas wanted to take hostages, and we understand why. They need leverage. They're currently in a concentration camp. They need leverage. The traditional, you know, they can't rely on the international community. Just look at where that has gotten them. They're rotting in cells right now, essentially. So they're taking hostages. You know, and I don't condone that, but when you do the maths and you see how these people are cornered, what do you expect? You know, they're having all of these injustices against them constantly. What do you expect? And
in the past, they've exchanged one Israeli hostage for up to 1,000 Palestinian hostages. So you can see the importance for them to do that.
And you know, so taking hostages, kapai, for me, that was the goal of October 7th, to take hostages and to have leverage. There has been no official investigation. In fact, Israel is repeatedly blocking calls for independent investigations.
Yes, they even really recently said that they will not do an inquiry themselves.
So, who has been killing who? We know that the Hannibal Directive was active that day. We know that there were, you know, wounds, craters, big bonfires, cars exploding, and things like this. Things that couldn't happen through the types of weapons that Hamas were carrying on the day. The types of destruction that we really saw, which I don't know the exact numbers, but the types of destruction that we saw, which took a lot of lives, it is sensible to say that that was the fault of Israel. And potentially, and because no official numbers have been done, it is possible that, the majority of people killed, potentially everyone who was killed, that's a far-fetched one, but it is possible because there's been no independent investigation, could have completely been from Israel. The majority of casualties...
We have enough evidence to say that Palestinian militants definitely killed people on that day.
Kapai.
But we don't know how the situation would have gone if Israel didn't apply the Hannibal directive and just open fire on everyone. Because the situation required a response from the Palestinian militants as well. But as it stands, it needs to be said that there is no argument that Palestinian militants did kill people and kill civilians and commit war crimes, even within the context of them being occupied people. But that's just the superficial UN investigations that they've done that have not been official investigations because, as you say, Israel has refused.
And I think this comment from Blue Skies is really good. Israel was always going to do this. They would have done a false flag if they hadn't forced Hamas to desperate action. Absolutely.
Yes, there's no doubt in my mind.
They've been on this trajectory for a very long time. The fact that Hamas did something and Israel decided to use it as an opportunity, there's nothing for us to say that they wouldn't have just, as Blue Skies points out, created some type of false flag. America are guilty of doing this in the past on multiple occasions. So nothing new. It's the trajectory that we've been on for a long time. And what Palestinians were already going through before October 7th was horrendous anyway. And so their treatment was not acceptable at all. So something did have to happen. I completely support the whakaaro that something had to happen. Innocent people who have lost their lives, it's an incredibly sad and terrible thing. But it's just not moral. It's not acceptable for us as the human species to just say that Palestine had to be condemned to being the slaves of Israel for the rest of eternity, to be discriminated against, to have police checkpoints, to be dehumanized on a daily basis was just unacceptable.
Yes. And one of the important things as well that our news media leaves out when they talk about this is the entire context of occupation, which is just the main beginning of the story, is the fact that Israel occupies Palestine under an apartheid regime. 2022 was one of the deadliest years in the West Bank, so not even Gaza. And they've been facing October 7s basically every day for decades. So they're leaving out the context of occupation. I mean, the word that occupation doesn't even make it into news media. So it's that basic erasure to begin with, that there is colonization going on here. That's the context from which October 7th happened. But I absolutely agree with the point that they made the most of that moment to justify their current ongoing genocide.
Kabai. So hopefully that answers your partai, Kiwi Bird. I feel like we've been waiting to have a kōrero about October 7th for a while, but it's going to keep repopping up all the time. But Kabai, back to our quick fire news segment. Sama.
Kapai. Okay, yeah, this is new. This just happened today. Government announces review into Waitangi Tribunal. This is a New Zealand first coalition agreement with National. And we knew it was coming. They want to limit the scope of the Waitangi Tribunal, give it even less teeth than it already has. One thing that I found kind of interesting about the story is that David Seymour, somewhere in this article, he says that this is because the Waitangi Tribunal has become too activist, and that they're going to put, they're going to put the tribunal in its place. On the other hand, National is saying that this is about making the process better, about improving the Waitangi Tribunal. They've got too many cases at the moment they can't keep up with, and they're just going to change it in order to improve it, which is, funnily enough, a similar justification that they gave to the pay equity scrapping of that legislation And again, the ACT Party came out and said, no, this is about saving money. And I just think it's hilarious that the ACT Party is always giving it away, even when National's trying to control the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Kapai. Also, was it yesterday? We attended a rally. I think we can call it a rally at our council, Kaikoi Council, in support of local hapu who were opposing the fast tracking of a marina in Waipiro
Bay.
Waipiro Bay. And
which is not the Waipiro Bay in Gisborne, by the way, e hoa ma. We've got two of them. This one is close to Rafiti. Rafiti, sorry. It's close to a place called Rafiti. It's not Rafiti. For some reason, they've gotten used to pronouncing it wrong there. Aroha mai. Maybe this is just the Tuturu way of pronouncing it, and it's some interesting dialect. But anyway, Kaumatu and Kuya there, everyone there calls it Rafiti. And that's very close to where Julian Bachelor is. Just for a little fun fact. Or is he in Rafiti? Rafiti, sorry. Anyway.
Kapai. So this is Julian Bachelor land, yeah. So it was beautiful, empowering, amazing, but also devastating to hear stories of local hapu who had lost the majority of their lands, and now on top of that, they're still disrespecting their settlement rights and customary rights to be able to simply fish and collect pippies and other food from what is currently public land. But what this marina proposal would do, which is actually pushed for by Sky TV founder Craig Heatley, whose company and their developments back into this marina that they're wanting to build. And so it's all part of this wealth project for this already wealthy person who, in this paywalled article, actually, someone posted the images of it, was posing with the Zuru guy, Nick Mowbray, who's currently the richest person in this country. So it really is a war between the richest people in this country around Māori, against Māori, who are trying to protect the environment for all of us. Because when you look at what these hapu are trying to do, they're trying to protect this public land so that anyone can go and collect food from there, Māori or non-Māori. They're trying to protect the habitat so that the animals can exist, so that the environment is beautiful, so that people gain spiritual value from it. So they really are there on the front lines, protecting the environment for everyone. And it really is just these extremely wealthy elites who are trying to remove that barrier from them just exploiting the environment and the land. Because
can I just jump in there? And like an example of how hapu have been looking after the taiao in this space, and and their local voices are being sidelined. The kalupa, I might not be saying that right because I don't know heaps about the kaupapa, but kalupa, this invasive weed, this green weed that just mats ecosystems and fills up all of the little crevices of everything, just like farm sediment, and fills in all of the little habitats that our sea creatures love. That has this area that we're talking about around Waipiro Bay has been a hotspot, an absolute base for this new invasive weed that is coming out. And hapu of the area have been activating, have been getting volunteers, have been organizing, really from the kumara vine, right? Grassroots, flax roots, protecting this space so that it's not overrun with this invasive weed. And of course, people are just doing this off of their own fruition. They weren't told by the government to go there. These were hapu-led initiatives for the benefit of everyone. And these are the voices that are being left out of these processes. And of course, a marina, it's all about boats coming into the area. This invasive weed, one of the ways that it spreads, of course, all invasive marine organisms, they can spread by latching onto boats. And then those boats go all around the motu and spread these invasive species everywhere. So not only are the hapu's voices being sidelined, while they are practicing kaitiakitanga for the benefit of everyone, they're highlighting that this marina is putting the rest of Aotearoa also at risk.
Yes. That was a
It's very
really
sad.
interesting. They did so much research for this presentation against this marina. So many statistics. There's proof that there's no demand for it. There's already a lot of empty parking lots for boats. I don't know what they're called. In nearby areas that aren't being used already. So the demand isn't there. And the way that this is going to impact other communities, the way that the locals don't want it, because the locals are mostly like us, not very rich. So we don't have boats. And so no one locally is asking for this. And what we're experiencing in Aotearoa, and we're going to see a lot more of this as well, is these rich people coming in from around the world trying to privatize the pristine and beautiful areas that we still have in Aotearoa, because these locations are dwindling around the world, and capitalists are expecting the demise of our environment. They know that climate change is happening. They know that this is a reality. They know that these beautiful areas are becoming harder and harder to find, and they're eyeing up Aotearoa, and they're thinking of coming here and buying and privatizing and building their little retirement homes there and whatnot. So the preparation of the government of removing Māori out of the way is directly linked to that not just local demand of rich people, but global demand for privatization of beautiful areas. And Māori aren't going to give that up without a fight, because Māori have already lost so much, and what little land that they still directly live on right now, that's what they're trying to rip from under them. The land that, people that I was talking to at this rally, they said, I couldn't not come to this protest because I personally go and collect pippies from this beach. How could I go and collect pippies from this beach and then not come to challenge them destroying this environment?
Kia ora.
And so, again, it goes to show that it's the people who are directly living on the land that care for it the most. And Māori communities all over the country, they have retained their communities. They have retained a presence in all of the areas around the country. So no matter where they're looking to privatize, destroy, or fast track, there will be a Māori community that's going to stand up to them. And you're seeing this response not just in our corner of the country, but all around the country. You see these fast track proposals being opposed, and these movements are being led by local hapu first and foremost. And again, putting it out there that if you have the capacity to support your local hapu, to join them on their rallies, because really they are really just trying to protect the environment from getting screwed over for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't have the capacity to be there in person yourself, then just learn about the kaupapa. If you see them talking about it, learn about the kaupapa, share their posts, make some content if you can. But any way that we can highlight and elevate those voices of locals who are on the ground doing the mahi, hapu initiatives or not, but locals on the ground doing the mahi, their voices need to be highlighted, because those are the voices that are being left out of these equations. So, kia ora koutou.
And yeah, to someone in the comments talking about tamapōtaka, I mean, my goodness, yeah, because of this Waitangi Tribunal thing, it's a New Zealand First thing. So again, just wanting to highlight that New Zealand First is just as bad as ACT. Not only do they want to change the scope of the Waitangi Tribunal, but they're wanting to review every single mention of Te Tiriti o Waitangi or principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi within legislation. So there are numerous ways that they're coming at protections for Māori rights.
But it's nothing new, eh? Like we saw someone posting and they were like, oh, look, the treaty principles bill failed and it didn't get through. So now look, there's New Zealand First with their attempt to remove treaty references from legislation. But that's been around for a long time. Not only in the New Zealand First National Coalition Agreement did they already plan this, but we know from ages ago that New Zealand First has been after this because of a previous bill. The first iteration, they called it the Treaty Principles Deletion Bill. That was from New Zealand First back in the day. So now they're talking about doing a review/removal. We know that it's a removal because of the whakapapa of this bill. But just wanting to say that, it's not that they tried something and then it failed and so they're going to try something new. It has been a multi-pronged attack from anti-Te Tiriti activists ever since the beginning. And the funny thing is even that National never even needed any of those things to roll back Te Aka Whai Ora, to roll back Three Waters, to roll back or to re-attack Māori wards, things like that, which are te tiriti breaches, to remove te reo Māori from government documents, etc., etc. They didn't need New Zealand First or the ACT Party to do either of those. And that is a current attack that's taking place right now. So yeah, there's nothing new. The hate for te tiriti and the desire to suppress Māori rights has been consistent. And it will continue to be consistent, unfortunately. But I just think it's helpful for us to view that is the broad, big kaupapa. And it's not like a hot, like just a moment that they're jumping on to get on the bandwagon. It is the wagon. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing kaupapa of this government trying to not live up to te tiriti o Waitangi in any way, shape or form. And that goes for successive governments. This government's just rolling back whatever small gains have been made, and then when Labour comes in, they might unroll back those gains, and then we're just back to the status quo again.
I think the difference between New Zealand First and the ACT Party is that New Zealand First is really racist towards a lot of immigrants, and whereas the ACT Party, they're kind of into that global agenda of, you know, just blank slating everything and just normalizing. Well, it's hard for me to describe, but New Zealand First is more like
that can be more
redneck
nationalist.
racist.
That can be a little bit more nationalist. Like there was the right to repair bill that New Zealand First supported, and it actually passed. And there was one other bill that's not coming to me right now. But recently there were two bills that New Zealand First supported along with Labour, Te Pāti Māori and Greens, and helped them to actually pass it. And so there are times where they're a little bit more populist. Whereas the ACT Party is explicitly like, we're here for the elites. We don't give a shit about anyone else. But New Zealand First tries to play the, oh, we're here for the working man, da-da-da. I think so, anyway.
No, I think that's a good distinction.
Kapai. So that was our day yesterday.
And I just thought it's hilarious. My sign right there, nature over money.
It was there during
I don't know if we just missed it. I'm just going to wind it back a little bit. And like you can see it in there, you can see it. We're holding up in the council chambers, and then the clip changes, and it's still in the exact same place.
And do we see you're in this video as well? He gets interviewed as well.
Yeah, they didn't include my whole quote. I actually saved a quote for myself in case I was interviewed, and the quote is from Brad Windust. So tēnā koe, kia koe, e hoa. I thought I just wanted to get your kōrero out there more because I thought it was really good, which is that. As Brad says, that fast tracking is not about speeding anything up. It's about pushing through projects that don't meet our environmental standards, but removing our ability to have a say on those things. That's what fast tracking is all about. In Brad's words, so tēnā koe kia koe.
Well, we ended up
Did you find it?
Your interview is... was after this lady, right?
Have we even got audio of that? Sorry, aroha mai e te iwi. Don't think we've got audio on that guy.
Oh, sorry.
I will just readjust the settings. Aroha mai. It's good because
it's Peter's fault.
Only help the
he's the one
super
who does all the
wealthy.
technicality.
It's not for the locals.
You know, there's no input from the public on these things, and it's going to affect all of us. And it's all about money.
Kia rongo kai kōkiri I te prene te reo.
Kapai. So no input from the public. No say, no way. That was our saying on the day. Kapai.
Kapai, what's next?
I think that was it in terms of fast news. Yes, absolutely. Very concerning developments in India and Pakistan. Someone was saying it in the comments. We're not experts on this topic. We do know that ever since the partition, the Western powers have collaborated with Pakistan. They have funded terrorist activities against India. However, at the same time, I'm very concerned by the Indian reaction. Some of the things they're saying are, you know, they remind me of the genocidal language that Israel was using at the beginning after October 7th. So I'm seeing a lot of similarities, though I am being warned by activists not to compare Israel and India because India has been for the longest time anti-colonial and against Israel until recently. until the recent nationalist anti-Muslim movement has taken over power. So there's a lot of complicated dynamics going on there, but both of them are nuclear powers, and a full-on war could threaten the death of hundreds of thousands. Some people have said 1.5 million people. So that would be the worst case scenario. That's absolutely not what we want. But in terms of the historical basis for this conflict, I would love to interview, maybe we can bring Josephine on this show to discuss how we got to this point here. But I know that Western powers agitating in that region, you know, like even around the war on terror or the war of terror, they brought Pakistan into it. They funded militants in that area, and these have been causing issues on the border with India and now have been escalating. It's kind of like the classic Western method to create agitations between two countries. But I'll just leave it at that, and I would love to talk about this topic more, absolutely, and to bring on some guests, which is something I can't wait to do. I feel like this podcast is going to elevate the day that we start bringing on experts and not just us.
And I'll just say, if you're watching and you've been enjoying this content, please do hit that like button on the stream. It does help us a lot. And just to give like our loyal listeners something to look forward to, I feel like, what are we, right? We're on like episode 16 or something now. We've been learning as we go. You know, we've been balancing like our Wi-Fi connection, and like right now we're running on a generator right now. So like there are just little things that we have to play around with to make this podcast or stream possible, but we are learning, we're getting better at it. And I think maybe we should make like a call, like by like episode 20 or something.
That will have a guest on.
Like,
yeah, we need a limit.
We need to change our intro video. When we made that intro video, it was just like a quick little funny thing that we thought we'd put together, but there's so many cool things in there that things that I think we should highlight in terms of intro video.
I love the intro video.
But yeah, maybe like, let's say it. I'm gonna state it.
Oh,
I'm gonna state it. Episode 20. You can expect a rebrand, a leveling up of this here stream. I'm going to say that we're going to have guests come episode 20, and we'll probably try to have guests on each show.
At least for 20 minutes a show, yeah.
Yeah. Cause,
wow, okay, you didn't realize that's 4 weeks away, right?
Bro, we can do that easy. We're already ready. I think it was just, it's good for us to put that out into the world. Yeah. Ka pai. Okay, let's move on.
Ka pai. Oh, I'm absolutely loving all the questions though, and just keeping us engaged.
Because we cannot be experts on everything, and that is the strength of bringing in people for the interviews. We love to investigate stuff and find connections between things and be clever in those ways, but there's just no way for us to cover all of the kaupapa and topics that are important, that y'all want us to cover, that we ourselves want to cover, so that we can contextualize it into our own knowledge. So yeah, looking forward to bringing on other experts. Ones that people don't generally hear from. You know, it's not just going to be Chloe Swarbrick every episode. Although I love Chloe and I hope that offer still stands for her to come on the show.
But that's one thing we're passionate about, is like, who are some incredible experts in our community that we don't hear from often. We're probably going to fall into the trap of bringing on the classics, but there are some people who we don't often hear from who have incredible things to say. So
yeah,
who are those people? That's who we want to hear from. To the person saying... oh wait, I took it off. Who's the handsome guy? Are you talking about the mayor?
He is a rather handsome man.
Because I think even Peter won't mind me saying that he's a handsome man.
Ka pai, aroha mai. Let's move on. The main kaupapa o te rā.
Okay, but no, but Moko's amazing. Like, our first experience of going to that council, which was after us being heavily engaged with the Kaipara Council, which is the most racist council in the country. We moved straight from that to this council, which I would say is the least racist council in this country, arguable probably, but it's definitely up there. And the first time I went in there, all of these guys, including Moko, Hilda Harawira, the wife of Hone Harawira, and other people on that council, gave speech after speech after speech about decolonization, about land theft, about fighting the colonizer, all this super radical stuff. And I was like, This is our council.
This is our home.
This is us.
We're home.
So yeah, our council is incredible.
Yeah.
But let's make sure we all get out and vote this next local election.
That's the thing, right? We cannot be complacent, and everyone just check yourself in terms of your where you are registered, because it's going to be done by post. So you need to have your fixed address correct with the electoral system for you to get your papers for local elections. And like here in the far north, this is the far north district council that we're talking about. Yeah, they're awesome in terms of who they've got in there, but it kind of reminds me about when everyone was in love with Labour and our guards dropped. Everyone dropped their guard, and we can't allow that to happen. We have to be, we cannot be complacent, because those who are on the other side of the fence, who I like to think are still our friends, they're not our enemies, you know what I mean? But they are hoping for a different outcome than we are, and they are organizing, and they're very good at organizing. So even if you're feeling that you've got a good council at the moment, just have a check in that you're going to get your papers, and make sure you're voting for someone where the vote isn't going to be split. Like let's say, in Kaipara, everybody is going to be wanting a new mayor, but if lots of people put their name forwards and there's a few popular people to contest that mayoralty, but in Craig Jepson's case, the current mayor, if no one on the right side of that political spectrum tries to contest Craig, then all of their votes are just going to concentrate on him. We're going to split our vote between a bunch of candidates, and the status quo is going to continue. So get to know your candidates, get to know others in your community, who they are voting for. There's always a lot of history in these things, and if you find the right people, you will be able to talk to someone who knows where the leaning is going in terms of the community. So just check in. Don't be complacent. Kia ora.
All right. And just to quickly add that there is some discussion going on. You might be the handsome guy that the commenter was writing about, as opposed to...
Is this news? Is this important?
So, if that's the case, then I completely agree that Petty is handsome.
PDA, cut it out.
Okay, so let's get on to our main topic of conversation for today. So, I'm sure all of you have seen it by now, but the government is scrapping pay equity legislation that they supported in 2020. It was unanimously supported then. And actually, the National Party at that stage in 2020, they passionately supported it. They were angry at Labour because they had introduced similar pay equity legislation in 2017 and 2018 that the Labour Party refused to pass. And so in their speeches in 2020, they were bringing that up. They were like, you guys have been dragging your feet. We've been wanting this pay legislation for a while. And so they were really, really happy to support it. Now they're scrapping it. We know they're unprincipled. We know that they just do whatever they think is efficient for them politically in the moment. It's no surprise, but it is funny to go back and watch the speeches from Nicola Willis and Louise Upston and Erica Sanford, and they're talking about their daughters and the future that they want to create for their daughters, and they give these seemingly impassioned speeches, and now they're scrapping it, and they're saying, who gives a shit about that? Because actually our daughters are not working class. They don't have to worry about these issues. I've got enough savings for them to live off for the rest of their lives, basically, and a bunch of properties they can profit from. And really, I'm not in the same societal class as those women who are concerned about those things, so we're happy to scrap it. Those are all my words. So National Party scrapping pay equity legislation, but the worst thing about it is that they're doing it retrospectively. That means that it applies to the past. A law that applies to the past doesn't make sense, right? You're not meant to pass laws like that. You're not meant to pass retrospective laws. It's considered unconstitutional. But because New Zealand has an informal, unwritten constitution, they can get away with passing unconstitutional laws. So there's another argument for having an official written constitution, right? So they are passing a retrospective law, and what that means is that 33 different cases that are currently, and have been some of them for years, fighting for pay equity for female-dominated jobs under the previous legislation, all of those cases are going to be thrown out. all of that hard work for years of compiling evidence, trying to prove that this is indeed paid discrimination, all of that hard work is being thrown away. That's why you're not meant to pass retrospective laws, because you put all this effort and time into things and then they might just be thrown away. It's considered unfair if you can't predict the law, if you can't be sure that the current things that you're fighting for are going to pay off. And actually, in this particular situation, one of the cases were just a couple of weeks away from negotiation. So it again highlights the importance for National to have passed this law under urgency. They passed it really quickly so that no one enters into negotiations as a result of the previous legislation, and therefore they don't have to pay them out for underpaying them all of those previous years. So that's the background of this current scrapping of the legislation. Now, this government has been just so super shady about it. Not only have they done it under urgency, they only told Labour MPs... They only told National MPs 2 days before they told the public about it. So this was secret outside of Cabinet, outside of the central group deciding it, until the 2 days beforehand they told National MPs. Everyone found out about it. And then this is from Mountain Tui's Substack. All of the human rights considerations that were made in the report about it were redacted. So, like, literally every single one. This is the document they released to the media.
Oh, that's good reading, right? That's my kind of reading right there, I'll be honest.
So basically, they're shitting on human rights. I mean, I guess we can just say that much, right? Because why else would they redact it? So, done under urgency, done retrospectively, human rights considerations completely redacted. So it's unconstitutional and it's just undemocratic. And remember, this is a government that came on the platform of democracy.
Oh, yeah.
But as we know, all of their narratives are pure projection. They knew they were going to come onto the scene and just trample all over our democracy. And so that's why they were, in the lead up of elections, talking about how good they are for democracy and how Labour was a threat for democracy. Because remember, this isn't the only law they passed under urgency. I think that's, some of the narratives around this law are hyping up the fact that this has been passed under urgency. And granted, this is a very important thing for them to pass under urgency. However, this has been their MO from the very beginning. From the day they've been elected, they've been passing laws under urgency and bypassing normal democratic processes. So this is just run-of-the-mill.
Bill, just everything, eh?
Everything has been...
Everything. It's insane how undemocratic they've been. So you're like a pure projection, as you say. They knew that they were going to be doing undemocratic things, so they had to pad everything with saying that they're pro-democracy, but pure projection.
Yes. So... that's the background for the bill, right? They've gotten a lot of heat for it, which I love to see. I love to see. Even in comments on articles, you see people saying, I'm not going to vote for you again. So it's national voters who are upset with it. Unions have responded really strongly. The public in general hates it. The media has been hard on it. The response has been great. This justification from Brooke Van Velden, extremely telling, folks, extremely telling. Asked how she would, so a bit of a typo in One News.
Asked how she ensure women were not hurt by this. The minister said, I'm a woman and I support women who work.
Okay, so just a classic weaponization of identity politics, right? Asked how this is, going to impact women. She said, I'm a woman.
Talofa.
The right wing loves weaponizing identity politics. That's their favorite thing to do. It's the same way that Winston Peters stands up and says, well, I'm Māori, so I'm allowed to shit on Māori. She's standing up saying, I'm a woman, so I'm allowed, And really, what's more important about Brooke Van Velden than her having the biological features of women is the fact that she was brought into power by the richest family at the time of the entire country. So look at this article. Want to know who's going to win the election? Watch these seats. June 18th, 2023.
Oh, wow. Again, Andrea Vance. This is who wrote this article. Interesting.
Well, she's, you know, and she's not saying it like a negative thing. She's just like, rich people control election. Yeah. That's the tone of the article. She's not condemning it in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, scroll down. Money talks, true wealth whispers. But it speaks volumes when the country's richest family wants to hear from a politician in their own home. Last week, Gretchen Hawkesby, the daughter of billionaire Graham Hart, and yes, Gretchen Hawkesby is related to Kate Hawkesby, who works for News Talk ZB, in that she's married to Kate Hawkesby's brother. Cut by that aside, the daughter of Graham Hart, who was the richest individual in the country at this time. He's been surpassed by Zuru founder Nick Mowbray now.
Big supporter of the ACT Party. Biggest donor to the ACT Party.
The biggest donor of the ACT Party, but he also donates to National and New Zealand First. So he just loves the current coalition. They hosted a house party for Brooke Van Velden. So she had the backing of the richest family in the entire country. This is far more relevant than her having boobs.
Being a woman, right.
Being a woman. Having biological parts that makes you a woman, which is completely irrelevant to anything. Her being a woman is literally irrelevant. Literally. You can see it as a betrayal, if you want. And a lot of, especially Labour ministers, pointed out how much of a betrayal it was to see women taking away women's rights. But I think we need to get past that. Women can oppress other women if they are supportive of the wealthy class. Doesn't matter. They don't care if you're a woman, a man, Māori, white. They don't give a shit about those identifiers. All they care about is the private profit of the people who fund them. So her being a woman, entirely irrelevant, but she knows it still works. She knows it still has some power.
It's a very, very strong spell. A simple one.
Yes.
But a powerful one.
And that's why she's still using it, saying, I'm a woman. But we just need to get past it, you know? And I saw one of the things that Labour brought up during the discussion as well, is that they said, you know, one of the things that this government has done in terms of abusing women was changing the 50-50 proportion of female leadership that Labour had actuated during their term. That's something Labour's really been really proud of. During Labour's term, they actually finally reached 50-50 in terms of female MPs and male MPs in Parliament.
Job done.
But even when you look at that time, and this is why I find this to be a problematic narrative, even during that time, the vast majority, in fact, the statistic that was going out at the time is that 90% of people who lost their job during COVID were women. I did read in another article, though, that statistic was a little bit of a miscalculation, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's a bit less than that. Let's just say the majority of people who lost their jobs during COVID were women. That was under the leadership of a 50-50 woman and government.
Not to mention, of course, Jacinda was, you know, Prime Minister was female at the time.
Exactly. And when she got questioned about that, because at the time the government was putting a lot of investment into infrastructure jobs, but despite the fact that it was the female-oriented jobs that were losing their jobs during COVID, and Jacinda came out right and said, well, don't be sexist. Women can do these male-dominated jobs too. And it's like, fine, you can say that in theory, whatever, but the reality on the ground is that women are less likely to enter into those professions. And so the things that Labour funded during that time were not good for women. And so the fact that it was 50% women, I didn't see that as improving the outcomes for women. You know, like Māori women remained the most incarcerated women in society. All of the issues that happened remained. But they did pass this law. They did pass this law, this pay equity law, which now National has scrapped. It's like whatever I say about Labour, just remember, folks, National's worse. Kapai. So the response has been incredible. There were protests yesterday, so like a day after the announcement. Unions went on to the outside the Parliament House and protested there, and then today as well. They've been protesting. They protested outside numerous politicians' offices. These ones we're looking at now are from outside Nicola Grigg's office. Wow, that's really good turnout. Let's give it a...
that journey would be.
Sorry,
or the personal toll it would take on my own mental health. I might not have had the courage to keep going, but I did. Because the longer the injustice continued, the angrier and more determined I became. Vulnerable, hard-working women and their children were depending on me. I could not let them down, and I will not let them down today.
Woo! From the river to the sea.
Palestine
will be free.
Get her off the stage.
Okay, so not just outside Nicola Grigg's, I saw there was a protest outside Chris Bishop's. There's protests across the country. Not only that, but we're seeing really radical kōrero come from some of these organisers. Look, this is from the president of the New Zealand Nurses Organisation. New Zealand Nurses Organisation, yeah, that sounds right. She says New Zealand government signed the UNCEDAW convention agreeing to mandate equal pay for equal work for women. This government has put this nation in breach of that convention. Just like women in Iceland who went out to strike to win equity, every woman in New Zealand should stand up and strike. I call upon every woman everywhere to organize, plan, and execute this action. That's radical, right?
It is. Yeah, no.
We love to see
very encouraging.
We love to see this because what we need is general strikes. We need general strikes. So anything that can help us work towards general strikes, to normalize general strikes, we are in support of e te whānau. Definitely supporting of escalating actions as a response to this move. Again, the fact that they've done a retrospective law is just especially disgusting. It's especially insulting, and it's wasting everyone's time and energy. So people are rightfully angry about this. And if it's going to build up the capacity for our movements to respond, then that's incredible. That's a good thing. Obviously, the removal of those pay equity legislation is terrible, but in the long run, building up our capacity to respond to these attacks is what we need.
And it's a shame to be forced to do it, just like everyone else, just like in Palestine, just like for Te Ao Māori, being forced to defend ourselves in these ways is it's never a good thing, but we have to make the most of the moment. We have to make the most of the energy that this is generating, and we think that this is putting it, just like with the Treaty Principles Bill, it built a lot of familiarity for people around how to make submissions. And the strength of making submissions, the strength of being politically engaged in general. So it's nice for us to be able to see those positive aspects, but absolutely an incredibly awful thing that has happened. And it's such a shame that our wahine are having to do this. As someone was saying as Kiwi Bird said, women, it's time to save the country again.
Let's go.
And, our wahine, they have so many roles, so many incredibly roles in our society. Like for Te Ao Māori, we have a matriarchal society in Te Ao Māori.
Let's go.
Papa Tuanuku, our Earth Mother, that connection with nature, that's kind of seen as a feminine space, a feminine ability or trait to be able to engage with Mother Earth, with Papa Tuanuku. And our wahine, our women, they're constantly, for lack of a better words, massaging that space, making that space available for us, ensuring that our human connection to the taiao is not severed completely because of colonization, because of capitalism. And so just want to take my hat off to all of our wahine. They're always the ones on the front lines of our activist spaces, especially in Te Ao Māori. Always the one leading kaupapa
Probably
are our
everywhere.
wahine Māori. Of course, yeah, probably everywhere. So an absolute shame. But hopefully we can take something away from this in terms of regaining our people power and our ability to strike and get out on the streets, because that's the only kind of thing that I see in terms of slowing down things like fast track, for example. They've taken away all of our conventional ways to complain and engage with the government. And it's quite clear to me that the only way to speak to these groups is to disrupt the economic system, which means, yeah, it's blocking infrastructure, like the Harbour Bridge, for example. Anything that is going to force them to engage, and that's where we're at. We are needing to force that engagement. We're having to force democracy.
Like talking to them at a food court.
I will do that again. I'm maybe not going to word it as I did last time, but absolutely, I think we have to take every opportunity, but we have to be smart about it.
Kapai, so people are responding really strongly to this. The unions are responding strongly, and we love to see it. We love to see it. General strikes, that's what we need to build up towards, and we need to also, what we need is to do the groundwork so that these attacks can't happen again. That's the difficult part, because we can't just return to the status quo under Labour, where the next national government can just unwind them again and waste our time again. We need to somehow change something on a structural basis so that these attacks can't go on again.
Childa.
Carpart. So Labour was very angry about this. That's not the way to do it. And I love that. I mean, I think I've been wanting this passion from Labour all along. I've been wanting them to portray to the public just how serious these attacks from the National Party are. And so I'm really happy to see it from Labour. This particular clip, though.
Before we get into this clip, we've got a little compilation.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Just some interesting kind of...
That was meant to be before all of this.
Aroha mai, I should have jumped in there. I got the... Oh well, kapai. So we've got a little compilation that we're going to play.
Okay, wait. Just to intro this compilation. Oh, guns. Yep. This is just some of our favourite responses compiled together in terms of what the government has faced, because it has been hilarious in some ways. And it's just great to see the National Party squirm. And they're hardcore in damage control now. Like if you look at their socials, they've got memes saying we love getting rid of pay equity, we love women, blah blah blah. So they're definitely in damage control. And this clip starts with, okay, so when you name a bill, one of the things that you can do is suggest name changes for the bill. And that's just something you can throw out there. There's no limits to how many suggestions of name changes you can make, as far as I know. So you can just put that out there. It's not as limited, for example, as when you're questioning the government. There's like explicit, narrow limitations of what you can question them on, depending on what phase of the bill reading.
As long as it's not against standing orders, you can pretty much do whatever you want in the House. And because this was done under urgency, pretty much anything that can be done to drag out the process, to, put the government into an additional day of working. If you drag out the process and force another sitting day, I think is my understanding of things. It's a technique, it's a method that you can use to elongate the process, which I think is a good thing. People will say, oh, they're wasting time. It's like filibustering. Yeah. So things like this can be done to elongate the process, which can be used to kind of combat the things that are done under urgency. It didn't stop the bill getting passed that day. But they still were able to do like A+ trolling. Yeah, it might give you like another 20 minutes, something like that. Like in the space of politics and things done under urgency, that amount of time can mean a big difference. So absolutely, I just think some people will think, oh, the Greens wasting time, wasting taxpayer dollars. But I think it has a purpose. It has a purpose. I'm not great at explaining it.
Even if it's an extra 20 minutes for the Green Party to be emailing their members and let them know what's going on, so they can prepare a response, like small things like that, absolutely. But also just the fun aspect of it.
I don't know why the comments. Oh, look at that! Look at that!
Oh,
that is hideous.
I don't know what's going on.
That is hideous. There we go. That's a nice cheeky workaround. There we go.
Kapai. All right, let's play a little compilation of fun stuff.
Kapai.
Lawrence Yunan's tabled amendment to Clause 1 to change the title to Equal Pay, Thoughts and Prayers, but your salary won't get higher amendment bill is out of order as merely an attempt to criticise the bill. To change the title to Equal Pay, War on Women amendment bill is out of order as merely an attempt to criticise the bill. Change the title to Unequal Pay Entrenchment Bill is out of order. Change the title to Equal Pay War on Workers Amendment Bill is out of order. Change the title to Equal Pay More Blue, Yellow and Black Tapes Amendment Bill is out of order. Change the title to Equal Pay Do Anything Other Than Improve the Tax System Amendment Bill is out of order. Change the title to Equal Pay Punch Down on Low-Paid New Zealanders Amendment Bill is out of order as being merely an attempt to criticise the bill.
When you start talking about pay equity, the first thing you must understand where women is concerned is what a woman is.
Is his definition of a woman someone who's paid less than a man?
What's your message to the women in government, particularly the ministers?
They can kiss my fat ass. My darling.
National's plan to ban social media for under 16s has sparked public debate.
I reckon he has a lot more other things to be worried about rather than social media for like us young like people. Like what other things? Like the salary of a woman.
What's your response to that?
Well, we are.
Bro got the memo. Damn.
He got the memo, all right.
So, that quip from Chris Hipkins.
That was good.
I saw that first. Well, we saw that first as like someone commented that on social media, and then I think Labour saw that and like, oh, let's give that to Chippy. But I think it's such a good one in terms of bringing it back to reality, because New Zealand First, they're always focusing on that culture war aspect and trying to bring it back to that stupid American culture war of, hey, what is a woman? And then give him credit, to Chris Hipkins, who was able to bring it back to reality and just flip that kind of narrative. And I think every time New Zealand First brings up this ridiculous thing about what is a woman, we can throw it back in their face with this one. That the definition is, someone who is paid less than a man. Just brings it straight back to reality in terms of being in that stupid culture space that New Zealand First is trying to always force it to be. So good job there, Chippy.
Yep, that was good. And I think, anytime they try and bring in that culture war stuff to just always bring it back to inequality, to the real issues that matter, and just remind people how stupid it is to be talking about the imaginary problems that New Zealand First and act like to bring up. Kapai, thank you for that compilation. So, Jan Tanetti, loved her kōrero, loved how passionate she has been about this. And like I said, this is the passion that I've been wanting to see from Labour. But there is an interesting comment in this speech. Let's just listen and then talk about it after.
And so she is condemning women to be at lower levels of pay for a long time. It is shameful. The government getting back into surplus should not be at the expense of women. And women are being asked to once again pay the price. Madam Speaker, this is an absolutely shameful day in the history of this Parliament. I have never felt so disgusted in what I am seeing right now.
She's never been more disgusted.
And maybe we're being a bit particular, she's obviously feeling angry in that moment, rightfully so, and so she's just speaking from her anger, and you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to just say things when you're angry, but I can't help but feel a little bit like, really? You've never been more disgusted in that moment? I mean, we've just saw the entire Treaty Principles Bill debacle, which is, it's retrospectively destroying the foundational contract of this country.
Yeah, and I mean, and
impacts everyone in this country.
Yeah, and of course, we're talking about an important kaupapa here, equal pay. But at the end of the day, we're talking about people who already have jobs. We're talking about people who are already receiving some type of income. There are more vulnerable communities that are impacted by legislative changes.
Yes. That's like cutting benefits and sanctions on beneficiaries and, prisoners, the things we do to prisoners, the things we do to young people in boot camps, and the abuse that they face in oranga tamariki care. I mean, there are so many vulnerable sectors of society that are even erased further than female workers in these professions. And there are attacks that this government has done that are just objectively more violent and more harmful. And in terms of disrespecting contracts, well, te tiriti o Waitangi is all I need to say. So it was interesting to see some people being more angered at this than anything else the government has done. This government has supported genocide for the last 18 months. They sent troops to bomb Yemen for resisting genocide. For me, that's a direct support of genocide. They condemned the UNRWA when Israel wanted them to do that. They have refused to condemn the Israeli genocide. And they, worse than that, are growing their relationship with the United States. They're planning to buy more weapons off them. They say that they share values with us. All of these things to me are so disgusting. Like even Winston Peters getting up in the House and saying about the Green Party and activists for Palestine, that they're frothing at the mouth about Gaza. He was mocking them. Oh, look at them frothing at the mouth about Gaza. Even that, in the context of genocide, is just so disgusting to me.
There was a more measured speech, I guess, after this one from, I think it was a Green Party member, and they talked about...
It was right after her.
Right after her, and they're like, oh yes, this is incredibly awful, but I'm not surprised.
It was Julianne Genter. Julianne Genter said she was, extremely distressed, extremely upset, but not surprised, because this is what the government has been doing all along. And I think that's just in my personal opinion, I think that's a more of a reasonable response to the situation. But with all of that said, I completely understand just being angry in the moment and just saying
totally.
shit,
And
I support Jan for doing that.
Yeah, and she's reflecting the energy of the public. The public is having strong feels right now, so they need politicians who are reflecting their Aotearoa. But yeah, let's get into the numbers.
Ka pai. So, getting into the numbers, firstly, just need to start with the fact that, so this is going to save the government something like 1 point something million. They've yet to come out with specific numbers. Yeah.
Surely more than that.
No, that's it.
Okay.
So this is going to save the government 1 point something billion, but again, they haven't...
Billion, you said million.
Oh, my bad. 1 point something billion.
Okay, ka pai. Kia ora.
But they haven't come up with the official numbers yet.
Okay.
So that's something they're being pushed on, and we'll see in the coming weeks. But it's let's say 1.3 billion.
Someone Google it for us.
Yeah, that's the number I've seen running around. Anyway, and one thing that Labour has focused on in terms of why this is so bad is the fact that there are tax cuts to the amount of 3 billion given for already rich people, to landlords, that National did in the last government. And they're saying this is even less than that. If you just didn't give those landlords those tax cuts, you wouldn't have to do this to balance your books. And so one of Labour's main narratives has been, you are throwing women, workers, under the bus in order to pay for your tax cuts for people who don't need them. Now, it's absolutely true that the tax cuts were an unnecessary waste of taxpayer money. It's absolutely true that landlords did not need a tax cut, and that people earning over a certain amount did not need a tax cut, and that could have all gone back into things that benefit wider society. So I agree with that, of course. However, this government is spending either 12 or 13 billion, because they just added a new billion recently, of military spending. 12 billion. That's more than 3 billion for tax cuts. That's more than any single expenditure that this government has done, as far as I can see. And so, and for this 12 billion military, that's 9 billion extra. 9 billion more than previous years. And what's interesting is that Labour hasn't been bringing that up. They haven't been comparing the fact that the military spending is so much more than that. And the reason for that is that, can you look up 2019? Oh, here it is. Hipkins said that they had a very similar direction for increasing military spending back in 2019. That some things had changed, of course. The geopolitical landscape has changed, but they said they were already planning to be spending up big bucks when it comes to military. They agree with this military spending. In fact, Hipkins went as far as to say an increase in defence spending is justified regardless of whether New Zealanders support it or not. There is bipartisan support for the military spending, and a lot of this money is going directly into the pockets of people who profit from weapons manufacturing. So your hard-earned taxpayer money is going into the pockets of people who are profiting from murdering people, who are profiting from destroying people's lives and countries. And Labour is fully in support of this. And look, I know because someone on Twitter was saying to me, but some of this is going towards people's salaries. And they mentioned the fact that Fleur Fitzsimmons, who's a spokesperson for the Public Service Association, said she brought this point up. So we ended up asking her on Twitter, someone else did, and Fleur Fitzsimmons came back and said $8 million of that $12 billion is going towards salaries. $8 million of $12 billion. Someone run the quick maths. I don't know how much that is, but tiny proportion of the $12 billion is going towards increasing salaries. So let's say we support increasing the current salaries of our people in the military sector. That's only 8 million. So that would leave 11.2 billion left. That would pay for the women's pay equity thing. That would pay for the school lunches. That would even pay for the landlord tax breaks and still leave us with a whole bunch of money. And so I find it fascinating that Labour doesn't want to bring up the fact that they're spending 12 billion or 13 billion on the military. They keep running back to last budget's 3 billion expenses for tax cuts. And the reason is that they both support this military spending. And as Pere has said before, what's most important and most interesting for us to focus on is the things that Labour and National both agree on. Those are the things that are the hardest to change. And that is absolutely true. And that is true in terms of the broader structural change that we wish to see for society. Because these small things that they're changing, pay equity legislation, all of the things that they're changing are things that Labour has allowed them to change by not making deeper structural changes. And so this is a good example of it. The military. It's so much more money, folks. And where are the questions about ethics? Where are the questions about buying American weapons while the United States is funding a genocide? Where are the ethical questions about spending 12 or 13 billion dollars while there are people starving in this country? Or even the biggest one of all for me is that the total sum of treaty settlements in this country since the beginning of time until today are around $3 billion. So just like that, with the sign of a pen, the government is able to give 4 times that amount to military spending, to American weapons. And everyone rules it out and it's all moved on. And yet over the history of time, only $3 billion for treaty settlements and an entire industry has formed against that process. Hobson's Pledge, democracy now, everyone, the ACT Party, their whole shtick is, oh, the treaty settlements gravy train. What about the bloody military gravy train? It's larger and that's only in one budget. One budget. Not over the history of time, not over paying back Māori for genociding their people and destroying their entire society and stealing the, 99% of the land. $3 billion and everyone complains and everyone cries. But $12 billion for military spending. Crickets from the Taxpayers Union.
Applause.
Yes. In fact, the only thing the Taxpayers Union said about this, and I find this quite fascinating, the Taxpayers Union said, National Party need to make sure they make big cuts to justify the military spending. So they support the military spending. They just want to make sure that the government cuts spending that helps support normal people on the ground while they're at it.
But in the way they say that, right, they're able to say, oh, no, we criticise National on that. No, we took some hard questions to National on that point, but not actually criticising the core of the kaupapa. Not criticising the kaupapa, just criticising, oh, well, how are you going to do it? And you better evidence exactly how you're going to do it, which I think is a really sneaky way of them trying to pretend to be biased. But of course, they have that very strong leaning for that kaupapa. They're politically aligned with that kaupapa. They're just trying to be seen as controlled opposition so that our media appears more balanced. Oh, so that's the other side of the discussion from the Taxpayers Union? No. They're completely aligned.
And you're so right, Kai Matata, and I found that really interesting, that article that you posted by New Zealand Initiative, where they were celebrating Hipkins. And of course, we remember this, right? At the beginning, when Hipkins came in, his whole thing was a policy bonfire. His whole thing was getting rid of the policies that Labour themselves put in place. So we knew that there was the trajectory of the Labour Party, and it's interesting that you face so much pushback when you do criticise Labour. We've experienced the same thing, but really it's normal when you consider that they're the other major party. The vast majority of New Zealanders either vote for National or Labour. So we really are on the fringes.
Yeah, and normally we're criticising, those on the right wing. And so we have everybody who supports Labour, amplifying that kōrero. But then when you come out against Labour, oh man, you get all the Labour supporters and a lot of the National supporters as well, because we're often advocating to go a step further, or many steps further than what Labour is proposing. So yeah, if you speak out against Labour, you'll probably have everyone come down on you. So
Kapai. So this pay equity stuff.
Kapai.
It's a very interesting one, because let's look at the, so this is the median hourly wage, okay? Median hourly wage, this is in 2023 statistics, so very recent, very good statistics to look at. European women, median hourly wage is less than European men. You can see that European men have 32 median dollars per hour, and European women have $28.80 per hour. So that's real. That's a big difference. That's almost $4 an hour difference between European men and women. So that there is something going on there in terms of gender discrimination. That's undeniable. That's across the board. You can see it. Kapai? However, when you look at Māori men, their median average wage is 27.7 per hour. That's less than European women's median average. And Māori women, less again. So again, the aspect of gender discrimination being real, although Māori women only get paid slightly less median average wage than men, and Māori men get paid slightly less than European women.
Oh, just looking at those numbers, interesting, eh? Asian women. And of course, love our Asian whānau. All good. This is just how the system unravels itself, right? So not trying to single them out, but it's interesting. Asian women actually make more than Māori women.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, our Pasifika whānau doing worse than the majority of us. They are the
same as Māori women. And if you look at, and another interesting thing with the Pacific peoples is that Māori Pacific women and Pacific men, the same.
Interesting there.
So gender discrimination doesn't touch them there, because the racial discrimination is so high that it tramples all over them. Kapai? Okay, so we're focusing here on Māori men and European women specifically. This is what I find interesting, because a lot of the kōrero around wage pay inequity just says that women get paid less than men. But which women and which men? Because this is just taking countrywide averages, right? And it's just saying, yeah, on average, women get paid less than men. However, Māori men actually get paid less, and Pacifica men, as we can see as well. get paid less than European women.
Sorry, yeah, you finished your point.
No,
sorry.
that's it.
Oh, just that it's, people might think we might be overreacting, but, when people say we want women to have equal pay to men, we want women to have equal pay to men, and it's in slogans and it's chanted and it's shouted. But in reality, what we're talking about, we want white women to have equal pay to white men. It's essentially the unspoken parts of those slogans. And when we say those slogans and we forget about that context, or we fail to give that context, I think it's incredibly dangerous. But at the same time, and maybe we should have prefaced the kōrero with this first, white women receiving pay equity with white men is an incredibly important thing. And if we're looking at this from a white supremacist point of view, the white male sits at the very top, right? He is the epitome of what is considered to be the perfection of all existence.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we don't just want to liberate the next down bracket from a white man, which is a white woman. We don't just want to liberate her. We want to liberate everyone who sits under that hierarchy. And we're raising this and saying, hey, you need to look at the others who are at the bottom of that hierarchy and consider them in your analysis. But it's not to undermine at all that the bracket beneath white men, white women, play an incredibly important role as a bridge between those communities.
Of course.
We're not
especially working class women.
We're not going to liberate Pacifica women before we liberate white women, which is an incredibly sad thing to say. And maybe we shouldn't accept that.
I don't think we should accept that.
But we hear it in our slogans, right? We're not gonna be able to convince people to be like, white women should have equal pay to white men. That's not going to happen. And so we do have to work with the energy of what we've got. But that's something that I think is very concerning. It's the unspoken things, and it helps to normalize white supremacy. It helps to normalize the current dynamic, and it helps to erase our minority communities who are doing worse off than white women. But absolutely, it has, we're not going to skip that bracket before we liberate others. So, I see it as a stepping stone. It's definitely a step backwards for us if we just accept all of this. We cannot just roll over.
It. That's something we can all agree on.
Mm.
Yes, and the government needs to face pushback for, especially the way they've retrospectively passed this law. It's so unconstitutional, such a waste of everyone's time. And because everyone was arguing their point in courts in good faith and following due processes, it reduces people's faith in the system in general. Why would we follow the processes next time if you're just going to scrap these legislations? So it's absolutely pivotal that we respond to this. But all that aside, it remains a fact that when we say women get paid less than men, that's not universally true. Māori men get paid on a medium hourly wage less than European women. But there is an even more glaring statistic than the one that I'm showing you right now, and that's wealth distribution. Because what we're talking about now is the medium hourly wage.
Wages.
So people who rely on getting wages, basically working class people. So yes, working class women in this country have it terrible. Almost as bad as Māori people. Almost as bad as Māori men. So absolutely, they're being oppressed by this capitalist system. However, when you look at wealth distribution, the gap is even more remarkable. The median individual net worth of Europeans was 151,000, whereas the Māori median net worth is 42,000. That's 109,000 less than 151,000. And that's for all Māori and all Europeans, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's an insane difference. So the racial wealth gap or the ethnic wealth gap is far, 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 far larger than the gendered wealth gap. And if we look at the gendered wealth, median personal net worth in New Zealand. Okay, so here we're looking at the median net worth for Māori and Europeans. Here we're looking at median net worth of women and men in this country of all ethnicities. And male, you have 113,000, and female, slightly lower at 100,000. But look at that figure. The net worth for females in this country, including all people, including Māori women, who will be bringing that statistic down because Māori women are within this 42,000 amount that we talked about here. So they'll be bringing down those statistics. Māori men will be as well for male. But regardless of that, the female average in this country is $100,000. So the female average for European women will be even higher than that because they won't be minusing out the Māori women, right? But let's just go with 100,000. Let's just assume European women's average net worth is $100,000. That is so much more than the average net worth of Māori men and women in this country. Because the average net worth of Māori men is within that $42,000 bracket. So the net worth for European females is far, far, far more than the net worth for Māori males in this country. The reason that the wealth inequality is so much larger than the wage inequality is because working class people are fighting for those same jobs, for the same opportunities on that lower class for working class people. However, there's another class people, the class of people that are relying on intergenerational wealth. That's who we're looking at here that is influencing those statistics. Wealth is different to wages because wealth is like all of your assets. It's your house, it's your trusts, it's
land.
It's your land, it's your cows, it's your savings, it's the money that's passed down through your grandparents.
It's everything settlers have held on to since the early days of colonization and the alienation of whenua from tangata whenua to our Pākehā brothers and sisters.
Yep, and so that's why in this country, European women, on average, not every single one of them, but on average, have greater wealth than Māori men because they've benefited from that intergenerational wealth that was created from stealing Māori land, stealing all of Māori land, and then turning that land into wealth. Stealing Māori, waterways and turning those waterways into wealth. So on and so forth. Those things have passed down. They haven't passed down to every single European woman, though, and that's why you find that some of those European women are within this waged salary. I don't know what those people's net worths are. There's so many statistics that I would love to get my hands on to fully explore this. But let's just say some of those European women did not have access to this intergenerational wealth that we're talking about, this passed down through generations. Those women are fighting it out just like Māori men.
Kia ora.
In that realm of working for employers that decide how much to pay you.
And not having those safety nets.
And not having the safety nets. Yes, absolutely. And so what we have here is that we cannot simply just say that women in this country get paid less than men. White women get paid less than white men, but Māori men and Māori women have it far, 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 far worse than European men and women. And so when we are talking about pay inequity, we absolutely cannot just be talking about gender. And we cannot just be talking about class. Because class alone and gender alone do not explain why Māori have a much, 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 much lower net worth than Europeans in this country. The only thing that explains that is colonization. It was colonization that stripped Māori of their societies and their land and passed it on to Pākehā. They were able to turn it into intergenerational wealth. And so, all of this to say that our movements need to do a better job at recognizing the root causes of our oppressions. Because what these women are, because I think median personal net worth is probably the best way to analyze the difference that people are doing in this country. Not to minimize from wage differences, because obviously wage differences can lead to horrific outcomes, even domestic abuse. Because if you're relying on your husband's paycheck and yours is not enough to live on, and then you'll stay with an abusive husband, right? And so there's been evidence to prove that pay equity reduces domestic violence. But net wealth, which includes everything around you, your comfortable house, your living environment, your ability to just live a normal, flourishing life, it matters a lot more than wages. And for people who have it, for people who don't just rely on wages, right? And so that's the thing that's most important to look at. And when we're looking at like liberal feminism, the idea that women should be able to join the army, or women should be able to work on the coal mines. We want gender equality in all these spaces, right? But that's overlooking the oppression that the military is causing. It's overlooking, for example, pay equity in a factory that's built on land that was stolen from Māori.
Urupa, wahi tapu.
It's built on the graves of Māori. What does that mean if we achieve pay equity within that factory while those Māori people are still living there, they're still in that community, they still want their land back, and they're still suffering from not having access to that land? It's like, it's
incomplete.
Yes. Achieving justice on a foundation of injustice is the problem that we're talking about, right? And when we silo our movements and we look at it through the single issue lens, such as this is just sexism, well, actually, we're erasing the fact that Māori men are getting paid less than European women. We're erasing the colonization of Māori in general. And so, someone who we really admire that talks about this, and I think, they do a really good job of explaining the flaws within this categorical way that we look at things, Like we put sexism in a box, and we put racism in a box, and we put classism in a box, and all of these boxes are separate to each other, and our social justice movements respond in that way as well, like we say, we're a social justice movement that's going to address sexism, and that's all we're going to focus on. But if you do that, you miss stuff. You miss stuff, and your solutions are incomplete. So like, even though we very strongly support this pay equity legislation, and we think we should very strongly fight back against it, at the end of the day, it's an incomplete solution. It doesn't change the fact, doesn't change these statistics. It might slightly improve the females in this category, but it doesn't change this underlying injustice in this country of Māori just being so much less wealthy and so much poorer than Europeans in this country. So in this book, which is Racism as Zoological Witchcraft, A Guide to Getting Out, I think that's the full name. It's written by Afko. It's one of my favorite thinkers of all time, and she discusses this issue with our movements. So where does it start?
According to next page, I reckon. According to two-dimensional understandings.
Oh yeah, that's the one. So I'm just going to read a bit of this. I hope that you enjoy
Story time.
Story time. According to a two-dimensional understanding of oppression, the oppressive systems look like the illustration on the next page. They all occupy the same space but are disconnected. These are these ones we're seeing here. Race, gender, and class. Each structure represents its own oppression with its own unique two-dimensional agriculture. By contrast, according to a multi-dimensional understanding of oppression, the house looks like the illustration below. Our understanding of a problem will undoubtedly shape how we create solutions to that problem. So if you understand a problem only through a two-dimensional lens, you will see two-dimensional solutions, which aren't solutions that really get to the root of the problem. In that setup, multiple movements will be invoked, each to tackle one oppression, because even in intersectional spaces, each oppression is seen as disconnected from others. Naturally, if you understand the issue is multidimensional and composed of other topics and issues, then the solution will be multidimensional as well. Based on your understanding of white supremacy, you will have different strategies for taking this down. For activists who have a two-dimensional understanding of the system, all they see is the front door in the illustration on the previous page, and that's their only mode of entrance. They see multiple houses that need to be taken down, so they need to multiply their energy in order to destroy them. In fact, these activists tend to get burnt out and exasperated pretty quickly because there is so much ground to cover and so many different structures to get inside of. They may end up pledging their allegiance to one group to perhaps preserve and focus their energy. In concrete terms, two-dimensional activists see only the face or surface of the problem, which tends to involve obvious culprits, like individual white people. Two-dimensional anti-racist activists will spend their energy educating white people, fighting them on cultural appropriation, and trying to discipline the ways in which white folks are engaging with the world.
Good example there, right? Like non-structural.
Yes. The anti-racist movement isn't the only movement limited to this logic, and then they give other examples of this happening. It's highly recommend. Let's go back to the illustrations. Okay, so what they're talking about here, and see this one, they have an illustration of people going from all different sides of the houses. What they're comparing is two different ways of looking at the issues. One, and I see this as the current dominant way of looking at our oppressions, is to view them all as individual structures. And I think this framing of this as being a war on women is an example of that. It's viewing the sexism as a standalone house that's oppressing women. And then you've got, you know, the standalone house that oppresses nature, and the standalone house that oppresses poor people, the standalone house that oppresses queer people, and so on and so forth. There's infinite houses. In the same way that we have infinite movements today, right? We've got anti-sexism movements, anti-racism movements, the queer movements, the, you know, nature movements, so on and so forth. But in reality, that's not what's happening. We don't just have these numerous houses that are oppressing us. We just have one house, the colonial house, with various different rooms and various different manifestations of those oppressions. And if we understood that, then all of our movements could come together and decide how we can focus our energy and tackle one point of this house together at one time and do it all with a focused energy. Because at the moment, we're dividing our energy between so many different movements. And so to bring it back to this pay equity conversation, it's not enough for us to simply say we want pay equity for wages within these specific services, although that is a stepping stone, as Petty was saying.
Kia ora, kia ora. Because
it doesn't address the underlying injustice of this country, which is colonization. And colonization, it's not just the fact that land was stolen from Māori and Māori are doing worse now, but colonization and all of its ideologies that have been brought here are what are now making even European women suffer. In fact, they make European men suffer too, because how much people earn and their wages is not a testament to how happy people are. And in my view, colonization destroys everyone's lives, even the elites. But let's just put them to the side for now and worry about them another time. But what European women are feeling right now is a symptom of the colonial oppressive ideology that views some people as human and some people as less than human. But the foundation of this entire country, you know, the things we've been reading recently about all the land that Māori are fighting back for across the country. Things like, oh yes, our graveyards, That's where the sewage pipe is now. This is where our home used to be. Like in, we were talking about the Auckland iwi, what was their name?
Te Kaweroamaki.
Te Kaweroamaki. And what they were fighting back in terms of the attacks from Shane Jones on their agreement with the council. You look at Te Kaweroamaki's history, and they stole their land so they could provide water for the Auckland region. You know, stories like that, that's going on right now. There are Māori communities still living next to the land that they yearn for, that's being used for the benefit of the New Zealand colony. And those Māori are still suffering today. Or we talk about Māori who are living in a community that they've always lived in, but now there are industrial pollution right next to them, and their people are dying from that pollution. This is the bigger injustice that's the foundation of this country.
Killed it.
If we accept that and try and build off that, we're never going to get equity for any other group in the country, full stop.
And not talk about it? Allow these kinds of like slogans that I was talking about, which erases colonization, erases the disproportionate impacts on these minority groups.
Yes.
It's just further taking us away. You know, we need to accept these foundational traumas of our society. The fact that Māori women, Māori men are paid so poorly in comparison to white men, the fact that that injustice exists and that we can allow that injustice to exist, the fact that we can allow white supremacists to set up that dynamic.
Yes.
And for some of us to be like, that's acceptable. I will accept that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as soon as you accept that type of corruption, that type of oppression, what else do you expect but for it to start expanding itself and to start growing itself? You know, how, like you say, you know, how do we build a just society on stolen whenua? You know, is that possible? For me, it isn't. You know, those foundational traumas, they manifest in various ways. If you don't address a foundational trauma, it's going to come out in some way. And for me, one of the big things that I see, you know, division amongst Māori and Pākehā. A lot of Māori, I would say, cannot move forward. It's not possible for a lot of Māori to just swallow all of this injustice, forget about it, and move forward in a positive way. Sometimes all you need to do in these situations is acknowledge the trauma. You know, the first thing to admitting or to making progress on a problem is to admit the problem. The fact that we all feel so left out of the kōrero, of the discourse here around, you know, advocating for the rights of white women, and for many of us feeling left out of that kōrero, is very divisive. Bitterness seeps in. And so, you know, without addressing these foundational traumas, I struggle to see how we can build these movements where we do all come together to try various ways of getting into that colonial house,
well, it erases,
to then disassemble it.
It erases the colonial injustice. You know, like something this book talks about is the way that discussions about the patriarchy don't clarify that they're talking about white men in America, because this book is about the American context. And so they imply that black men are part of the patriarchy. But when they do that, they're erasing the massive inequity that black men face in America, and the fact that they're in many ways doing worse than white women in America. It's the same concept here. If we're just going to blanket talk about the women in this country doing worse than men or getting paid worse than men, it's erasing the colonization of Māori and the ongoing oppression of Māori, which actually does culminate in Māori men getting paid less than European women. So it's that erasure of colonization is a really important thing, because, as you say, acknowledging it, and then the next step is addressing it. But first we have to acknowledge it.
And I just want to highlight not Bernadette. I think not Bernadette was trying to say something, but talking about otherizing, you know, when we think about the white supremacist structure, white men at the top, we otherize everything beneath that hierarchy. And that's just simply something we cannot have. That type of discrimination based on those arbitrary traits that the white supremacist at the top dictates to the rest of us. As soon as you allow otherizing, and you know, I saw not Bernadette's comment earlier talking about disabled people and how disabled people were not in that breakdown in terms of, well, I mean, you know, well, yeah, I think, you know, it's it should be. I mean, I don't know the percentages of populations and everything, but I think it's important to note that, you know, imagine a Pacifica person who is also disabled. I imagine that's probably one of the most otherized categories in our society here, but also just disabled people in general, regardless of ethnicity. When we talk about otherization and things like that, the disabled community have bared the brunt of perhaps the majority of that ideology of otherizing. Yes. You know, we think about eugenics and things like that. So, you know, those are our communities, you know, our trans community, our disabled communities, tangata whenua. These are the natural allies that I think first and foremost need to come together. And hopefully through our natural allies coming together, those who really can see their oppression in each other, hopefully we can build those bridges first in terms of us coming together with this collective approach to break into the colonial house through our various pathways, whether it's disability justice, takatapui justice, land back. Hopefully we can build these bridges first with our natural allies and then broaden it out from there.
Yes, agreed. And that's how it starts, is by us supporting various movements. And that's what our whole kaupapa is all about in terms of Aotearoa Liberation League. And yeah, in terms of that concept you're talking about in terms of othering, this is what I feel like this book is all about. And the theory of this book that I personally subscribe to explains what we're seeing, all of this, and everything that we've been talking about today, which is the colonial white supremacist theory that colonizers brought onto settler colonies like Aotearoa, views the white rich man right at the top, and everyone else is seen as subhuman, and to varying degrees, right? So indigenous people were the main things that were otherized in terms of the colonial project, in terms of them coming onto the land and wanting to steal all of the land and kill all the indigenous people and take it for themselves. They had to justify it. And in order to justify it, they were like, don't worry, these guys are inferior. They're like animals. They're not even human. So we can kill them. We can do whatever they want, right?
Which we think is like the biggest compliment, eh? You know, to be comparable.
Close to nature?
Yeah, to be comparable to kararehe, to our animal whānau whānui. That's a big compliment. I think everyone should aim for that type of lifestyle of living as close to nature as some of our wild creatures are. But it's kind of, yeah, but in this context, to otherize like that and to call a community animalist, you know, to animalize them is a huge tool of otherization to build resentment towards that demographic. Because, like you say, we see them as uncivilized. So, although I see it as a huge compliment, it's a tool of otherizing.
They're
to demonize against that community.
The reality, which is that indigenous people are truly closer to nature. And they're interpreting that through the colonial lens of saying anything that's close to nature is negative. And that's the ecofeminist perspective. The ecofeminist perspective is that even before colonization of other people's indigenous lands, there was the perception that nature was inferior. So there was
man versus nature,
the disconnection of man from nature to begin with. And we've talked about this before, about how they applied this to their own lands before they started colonizing other lands. They were destroying their own nature first. They were stealing nature from their own people, land from their own people, and hurting their own people first, right? All of these processes was according to an ecofeminist perspective, was the disconnection from nature and putting nature in this category of inferior. Anyone who got in the way of this expansion, of this imperial expansion, was shoved into this category of nature. So women who have often maintained that strong link with nature, historically across all cultures, okay? including in European cultures. And this is what the witch hunts were all about. The witch hunts were about attacking those women who were in Europe closely connected to nature, because it was a part of that severing between human and nature was to destroy the humans that helped us connect with nature. So they destroyed the women that were closest to nature, that knew about the herbal medicines that they got from nature to help people, the midwives that helped bring life into this world in a very spiritual and sacred way. The people who were able to basically look after people with what they had with nature without that external doctor coming in and a private corporation coming in and helping you. So basically self-sufficiency. That's what colonizers don't like. They don't like us being able to look after ourselves, feed ourselves, provide medicine for ourselves. So that's what they did. They removed our ability to feed ourselves by stealing land and turning it to the businesses that they wanted. They making us work for them instead of just growing our own food. They took away the special women in society that held that deep connection. Women and men, because the witch hunts killed men too, but it was predominantly women.
But yeah, also just in terms of what you're talking about, adding on to that, the severing of our spiritual nature, te ao wairua. They wanted to sever that. You know, we get a lot of strength from various places, but that spiritual space, and particularly during the witch hunts, you know, Catholicism, Christianity were huge powers at that time. And so any alternative spiritual views were the things that they went after first and foremost. But just, you know, the role that our wahine have played in terms of communicating and keeping us not just in contact and connected to the taiao, but to te ao wairua, the spiritual world, is an incredibly powerful thing. Like the strength that we get from te ao Māori, one of the many strengths that we get from te ao Māori is that anchoring to something bigger than, you know, our human experience here on the ground. The spiritual world is an incredible place. When you believe in something that feels bigger than yourself, you can find motivation and strength to do some really incredible things.
Harder to control.
You're harder to control. Yes, exactly. And of course, religion is their tool to control. If spirituality is our way of giving people something to hold on to and to ground themselves in this common value that ties communities together, you want to be controlling what type of spirituality that is.
Absolutely. And so they did this all over the world. They did this in every country they, you know, to their own people first, and then to every country they colonized, including Aotearoa, right? One of the first things they did here was suppressing the tohunga of this country, right? Suppressing Māori who had that spiritual connection. They were destroying Māori schools and forcing Māori to go into Pākehā schools. They were suppressing Māori medicine. Any Māori wisdom that helped people connect with the environment was deliberately and actively destroyed. Now, part of that was strongly linked to the feminine. And I think someone has been talking about this as well, a story that I do not know, that they minimize the word symbolism of te kore. There are so many stories like that of colonizers, for example, denigrating female atua in te ao Māori, female gods, or even just female characters that were important to Māori stories. They were erased, they were minimized, they were taken out of stories, and the male counterparts were elevated. And not only that, but Māori as a society was taught by colonizers, with the help of religion, that males were the head of society. This was not the case before colonization. From what I know, there were roles within Māori society prior to colonization, but it was a largely egalitarian society, a largely egalitarian society. What does that mean? That despite having different roles, Māori society viewed both roles as equally important. Whether you were weaving the mat or whether you were collecting the flax, both of these jobs were seen as being on par. Colonizers came and said, no, male jobs are more important.
Yeah, and we see that seeping into our people, you know. we also need to, and it sucks to say this, but we need to decolonize Te Ao Māori, which is a very interesting thing, which is why a lot of people talk about re-indigenizing. But, you know, it's like when you go to the marae and you listen to whai kōrero on the pai, which is the speaker's bench, generally that's made up of our tāne. You go to various places around the country and that rule does change, which is really nice. Like I whakapapa back to Ngāti Porou. And I think previously in one of these streams, I said that our tupuna from Ngāti Porou was a female. I got that wrong. My father corrected me on that one, so mihi atu ki a koe e matua. Poraurangi was our tupuna, who was not female, but many of the whare, our tupuna whare, our marae in Ngāti Porou on the east coast, Te Tai Rāwhiti, are named after wahine. And so, you know, a lot of our women signed Te Tiriti as well, you know. A lot of our women did a lot of things. But anyway, back to on the pai. Because in many communities, for many hapu, it's dominated by men, those roles have been elevated, you know, or the status of the people who take up those roles have been elevated for some reason, just specifically those people on the pai. But there are all sorts of roles that wahine take up, like doing the karanga, for example. That is, well, again, in some areas, I believe men can do this. At least my auntie here tried to teach me to do a karanga, and I was like, oh, is this right? Anyway, so lots of people have their own kōrero, but it's primarily a role taken up by our wahine. And a lot of wahine say that that's not enough, you know, for us to simply have those roles. We need to be on the pai because that is the space that has been elevated. But anyway, just simply to say, a lot of our men, we have fallen into that role of being sexist and of viewing the roles of our wahine as being lesser than the roles of our own. So there's work to be done in every space, essentially, is what I'm trying to say.
And because people are bringing up the kōrero around the room, can you please tell us about how the words connect in terms of whenua, and whenua the land, and whenua meaning the umbilical cord?
Oh, I'm sure most people will know this kōrero, but
tell us anyway,
that's a
Peter.
nice one to end on, I guess.
I had more to say.
Oh, you want to finish your kōrero and then we can end on that one, or what have we still got to go over?
I just wanted to, because I feel like I haven't even rounded up my kōrero. This is the issue with these long. This is the opposite of our 1 minute reels, folks. I haven't even made my point.
This is how we build and research our short reels, by the way. If anyone is ever wondering, this is the type of kōrero and session that we have with one another, and then we decide on our narratives that we put into those kinds of things, which we are looking to get back into. I think this is just a phase of us doing these types of long form kōrero. But anyway, as you were saying, if you want to try and wrap it up, let's give it a go.
Okay. So my main point around this kōrero is that the oppression that women are feeling in this country is real, but it is an expression of the oppressive colonial ideology. It is an expression of the white supremacist ideology that colonizers brought onto this land, which required otherizing indigenous people, but also femininity, because femininity has always been a little bit more connected to the environment, to emotions, to caring for one another, caretaking in general. And so it was imperative for colonizers to destroy that, to destroy the sacred feminine, to destroy feminine gods all around the world, and also to label them as somehow negative. So there's like often connotations about female gods, and now I'm spreading to around the world in general. Female gods often painted as like lustful or sexual or tempting males, for example. And that's they focus on that aspect of femininity because often colonial narratives reduce women to just being sexual objects for men, because men are seen as the doers of society, as the subjects, while women are the objects. So in this white supremacist colonial ideology that is brought onto Aotearoa, Indigenous people are first and foremost the people that are otherized. But it's also important to put women in that otherized category, to put animals in that otherized category, to put nature in that otherized category, because the things that colonizers seek overall, I mean, basically, what we're talking about is just a few rich white men and whatever's happening inside of their brains, okay? We're not talking about any complicated sort of, you know, external concept that's dropped into the ground from the sky. All we're talking about is a few rich white men like Graham Hart, like Nick Mowbray, like Elon Musk, or the billionaires, Bill Gates around the world, and the ideas they have in their brains. And of course, you can trace it back to colonizers and the white men that led colonization. The ideas that are in their brain are the ones that are transferred onto society because they control the media, they control the narrative. The media portrays women in a certain way, it portrays men in a certain way, it portrays indigenous people in a certain way. And in their minds, they are superior and everyone else is inferior, but in stages, you know. Their wife, their European wife, is going to be close to them in their minds. In their rich white man minds, their wives are just over here, just slightly under them. But Māori are over here, and animals are, well, they're you can't even see them in my camera. That's how low animals are. And then nature is even beneath that. But it's all part of one ideology. And the purpose of this ideology is to uphold the colonial system that exploits our land, that exploits indigenous people, and creates profit for those individuals. So that whole ideology is just beneficial for them to make profit. And so when women, the experience that we're having, the sexism that we experience in this country, which is real and it's horrific and it's increasing, and I experience it on a daily basis, is a symptom of colonization. And unless we address colonization and the dehumanization of Māori, other people are going to be put in that category of subhuman as well. And it's going to reach more and more people as time goes by, you know? Like, white men are feeling it more and more, right? White working class men. And it's only a matter of time before more and more white men get shoved into that category of disposable, of less than human, or, you know, of being imprisoned or being forced to suffer or have mental illness, or in Foucault's, what's his famous philosopher's name that I forgot right now? Apologies. But he says, you know, that things have changed from them outright killing people to now just letting people die. And so that's what colonizers are doing now. They're just letting people die, and they're going to let more and more people into that category of people that are allowed to die. And so all of this to say that we believe our movements need to come together against colonization, to stand up for Māori first and foremost, to start at the root cause of the issue, which is give Māori their land back and enable them to determine their own people and to govern their own people, as is the right of all self-governing nations in the whole world.
Kia ora.
And the thing that Moana Jackson talks about with settler colonies is that we sort of accept as a society that states that have experienced imperialism of colonization but still have a majority of their indigenous people in that country, that they're allowed to be self-determining, that they deserve decolonization. But that in states and settler colonies like New Zealand, Canada, United States, we've given up on the idea of indigenous people having self-determination because they're outnumbered. But that's not justice. That's not right. And that's that foundational rot of society that's going to impact everyone. It's going to impact white women, and they feel it less than Māori, sure. But unless we all stand up and rise up against that foundational injustice against Māori, one day or another, we're going to be shoved in that category of subhuman. So basically, we need to eradicate the category of subhuman altogether. No one's allowed to be in that category. Māori are not allowed to be in that category. And the implications of that are drastic because, you know, equal pay on stolen land, what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that I might get paid the same as the man that I'm working on, but that community whose land has been stolen from them is still struggling. They're still suffering. They're still yearning for that land back. And so that's what we mean when we say you can't have justice on stolen land, both as a reality because the injustice continues, but also as a mentality of the colonizers where as long as we're saying it's okay that some people are subhuman, they will apply that to other people. And the current state of the world that we're seeing right now, the expansion of fascism, of capitalism, of exploitation, the normalization of genocide, of, one thing I wanted to talk about just today as well is that, the imagery we've seen come out of Gaza.
It's funny, I was just about to kind of mention just other settler colonies and the strength. I don't lose your point, but just the power of settler colonies. Australia, United States, New Zealand, Canada, Israel. These are like the strong, like maybe not the, well, yeah, probably the strongest bracket of countries that exist. Settler colonies.
Yes.
So how do we disrupt the harm that these settler colonies are committing? And how are they able to cause the harm they're causing? Because of the capital that they have gained through alienating the indigenous peoples from their whenua. Them turning that into capital, capitalizing on that. And now they're using that to buy weapons, to buy farms, to buy fertilizers, to destroy our whenua, to rape our whenua in all manners of ways. How do you disrupt that? You gain justice for those indigenous, otherized peoples who have had their wealth taken from them and transferred into this white supremacist colonial system, which they are now using to further colonize other countries, imperialize other countries, and of course, create that system of otherization in their own society, where they have underclasses like how we have here in Aotearoa with Māori and Pacifica people. How do you disrupt that dynamic? You redistribute the wealth, or you redistribute the power in a just way. Land back here in Aotearoa. Look at what Kaitahu are doing down in Te Waiponamu. They're taking the government to court because the government is not adequately protecting fresh water. Wai Māori down in Te Waiponamu. A system of destruction from the colonizers is happening down there. And the way that we are disrupting that is we're challenging the government's authority, and we're trying to push through the courts for the acknowledgement of Kaitahu's authority in that space to then co-design a system of water management with the government and Kaitahu. So that's how, from an environmental perspective, we rebalance the power in that space to disrupt the colonizers' unfettered exploitation and extraction of our resources there. So in terms of what we look at in terms of capitalism and the harms of capitalism, how do you disrupt capitalism? From my perspective, it's decolonization, because it's taking away their means and their abilities to exploit us because of that power dynamic that currently exists.
Yeah.
So it's like, what is the solution to capitalism? I think it's decolonization. And so then the bigger kaupapa that I think we are talking about here, rather than capitalism, which is of course a part of it, is colonization, particularly here in the context of Aotearoa, but in the context of all settler colonies. This is the reality. Without addressing colonization, without justice for the tangata whenua, the iwi take, o te rā whenua, without that, we are leaving this huge power imbalance for then that higher power, that stronger power, to continue otherizing and abusing that power dynamic. And when you allow that to happen in any way, shape, or form, it continues to corrupt and seep out and poison everything around it.
Yes, and as someone said in our comments, that's the trajectory of capitalism. More and more people will be included in that category of disposables. As we're seeing the automation of more jobs now with AI and so forth, pretty much the vast majority of us are going to become disposable to capitalists. Once that day comes, that will be a very scary time for us. And unless we build up our resistance now, they're just going to let us all rot because we'll be relying on them completely. We're going to be relying on their food, their medicine, so forth. We wouldn't have built our own self-reliance infrastructure, and they're going to be able to decide willy-nilly what community to just not care about and to just let die. And the developments and that we've seen, you know, around the world, what I was going to say about Gaza is that...
You held on to it, nice.
At the beginning of this genocide, and we started seeing images of stripped down men and kids being lined up one behind the other and abducted by Israel, right? This is the people who have pretended like Palestinians are the abductors, okay? They've been just outright videoing and taking pictures of themselves mass abducting Palestinians, but also just treating them like subhumans and making them all, you know, undressed, naked and tied up and on their knees, and they have to eat off the ground and all sorts of
like
horrific
animals
stuff. Basically, if you look at the Israeli torture dungeons, they are treating them like factory farmed animals in terms of just giving them the bare minimum to survive, abusing them here and there, and they don't mind if some of them die of disease or whatever. Those images were life-changing for me because I was so horrified to see them, and I knew in that moment that if society didn't respond strongly to those images, that we are normalizing something new. Because
like
not
lowered the bar.
Yes, until that point we hadn't seen anything like it. The rounding up of people and stripping them down and just justifying abducting them all and then torturing it. We hadn't seen anything like it, okay? Now we're seeing that the United States is doing that with people that they're sending to offshore prisons, to El Salvador. Those prisoners that we've seen, they look very similar to the images I've seen out of Gaza in terms of them being stripped down, heads shaved, put one behind the other, and treated like animals. And so we're already seeing that normalization come to the West. We're seeing it in Western state in the United States now against immigrants, and not even necessarily illegal immigrants. Some of them are residents. Some of them got deported for simply having tattoos. But we're seeing this already come to the Western countries. We're seeing it come to the United States, being normalized. And people are still not waking up, right? White people in the United States are like, I'm a citizen. I'm white. This is never going to impact me. And that's the thing that we need everyone to wake up. First, they come for so-and-so. Then they come for that famous quote that I'm not going to butcher. But eventually, they will come for each and every single one of us. So all of this to say is that we need to come together and stand up for every single oppressed people in this country, especially the foundational injustice against Māori, if we want true justice for ourselves. Because as long as we allow the injustice against others, it's only a matter of time before we get put in those categories. And that is my extremely non-short, non-summarized summary.
Kilda. Well, it's very important. I mean, I have nothing to add besides the fact that we're not trying to belittle anyone who's advocating in this space. Really, all we're saying is we must go further, which is a hard thing to do. And in this time where we're being inundated endlessly with this, there is a need for us to react, and we don't have much time to think about it. And it is emotional, not just because we're talking about women, but it's an inherently painful space. It's impossible for us all to do everything at once. But hopefully we've been able to provide some insights for people to understand that it is as complex as you'd probably assume it is, and encouraging us to go further and to think about how do we come at this from a foundational level? How do we widen out our narrative to not do any additional harm? Like when you have a narrative that erases particular demographics, I think that is a bad thing, and we can probably all work on that. But that we're not trying to belittle anyone at all. We've got a lot of work to go, and we encourage everyone for the mahi that they're putting into this space. We need to go harder. We need to go further.
Pere over-explaining himself again. Look, we support women's rights.
The lawyers told me to say that. No, but no. I think that's all I have to say.
Yep, absolutely. We still want to hear that story about whenua.
Oh, can't wait. I'll just wrap up and say thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate all the comments and everyone who sends us emails, everything. Those who donate to our Ko-fi, thank you so much. And people who send us emails and people who want, because I say this in some of the streams, like, hey, if you've got skills and you want to help us, please get in touch and we can try and utilize those skills. And we've been heartened by a few people who have emailed us and who have been offering their services. And I just want to say my apologies that we don't have the time and the capacity to utilize all of these volunteers. We would love to be able to. And I think we will keep saying this kind of thing just to put it out to the world that we do want to grow and that we want to form some type of a collective for us all to become stronger. But that we're still getting there. And so aroha mai for some of the emails that we haven't responded to yet. Often it's just simply the case of, we're just not quite ready for that kind of engagement or that kind of thing. But hopefully we can get there. Maybe by episode 20, we're able to think of some of these ways to broaden things out, but we'll see. But okay, kapai. So just the kōrero that we wanted to end on, which highlights, the importance of te taha wahine, the feminine side, and how it's portrayed in our te reo Māori, in our language. It's a good way of viewing how close our people, tangata whenua, our indigenous people of Aotearoa, viewed themselves and their connection to the taiao. And so, okay, so it's a word connection. We can understand ourselves by analyzing our language, because our language is how we view the world. It's our matapihi, our window into te ao Māori and how our tupuna viewed everything. So to birth, the word for birth, which of course only our wahine do. Anyone with a uterus, I guess I should say. But it's a wahine space, if I were to conceptualize it. Birth, the word for birth in te reo Māori is whānau. Birth is whānau. I whānau mai o taua. And then when you move it...
you were born in Ottawa.
I whānau mai a haui o taua, yeah. So I was born in Ottawa. I wasn't. That's just for illustrative purposes.
Oh my goodness, you're confusing us, Pere.
Aroha mai. It's late, everyone. But so, whānau is birth, okay? Hapu, which means sub-tribe, and of course whānau means family, okay? I forgot that part as well.
That's an important part.
But to be pregnant is hapu. And hapu is our sub-tribe. So we've gone from whānau, family, and then a step out from that, hapu, sub-tribe, and then a step further from that, iwi is our, collection of sub-tribes. That's connected to the kupu, to the word kōiwi, which means bones. And so, all of those things are all connected. And then bring it back to even before the whānauing. Sorry, it happens after. The placenta.
Whenua.
Placenta, the kupu for that is whenua.
Which also means land.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a great way of understanding how connected our tupuna were with their whenua. They tied it in completely with our family structures, the process of birthing. And then, of course, for a lot of people, I know it's a custom in my whānau, and I'm sure it is for all of te ao Māori, is to bury our placenta back into the whenua. And it's not a kōrero that I've heard, but, we call ourselves tangata whenua. And so, we bury ourselves back into the whenua. And that's what makes us tangata whenua. We are literally a part of this whenua. We're part of this land. And, it comes across in our language. It's a really great thing to do to understand the Māori perspective, is to study our language, our te reo Māori. And I encourage people to do that. If you're wanting to understand the beautiful aspects of te ao Māori, learn some te reo Māori, like the place names all over Aotearoa. Some of our karakia and waiata, break those down and understand the kupu within them. There's a whole lot of mātauranga, a whole lot of wisdom and beautiful values and perspectives that we should live our lives by.
So, to summarize,
Mm-hmm.
whānau means to birth and it means family.
Yes.
Hapu means pregnant and it also means sub-tribe.
Okay.
Whenua means placenta and it also means land. And iwi means your tribe and it also means bones.
Ko iwi. There's a
Ko iwi.
connection in the kupu, yeah.
And so there is this really vivid understanding in te ao Māori that people are made of the land, which is a scientific fact. You know, like there's a saying in Māori, ko au te awa, ko te awa, ko au.
Mm-hmm. Kia ora.
I am the river is me, is a saying in te ao Māori. Well, you know, scientists now can tell you that humans are made predominantly of water. So it's not just a wishy-washy spiritual ideology, but these are actually based on scientific fact. We are actually made of water. No wonder we all feel sick these days when all of our waterways are dying. You know, I see that direct link. I know that Māori see that direct link. They're often talking about it, and they're so right. As soon as our waterways die, we're all gone. Forget about it. Water is the source of all life.
Well, who knows? You know, we'll probably be living some crazy futuristic lives
on Mars,
in a box, all eating, lab-based foods and things like that. But life,
maybe, but the vast
life
majority,
life as we know it, will be the vast majority of us. Those who are currently relying on our natural resources just to live, of course, we're going to feel it the most. But life as we know it will radically change as our wai Māori, our freshwater, gets worse, and so absolutely needs to be protected.
And so Māori having that spiritual knowledge, because you know it's all good and well to have that, like, kind of logically, and to read it in a book, like, oh yes, we rely on the environment to exist. But if you're disconnected from the environment, like physically, you know, living in a city, like I have for most of my life, you know, and being disconnected spiritually as well from nature, it's easy to read that and just sort of dismiss it because your daily life is churning as normal. But when you live on the land, when you're seeing the water dying in front of your eyes, when you can no longer eat from that water, from that land, when you can't survive, there's that direct relationship. You can see that your people will die as the environment dies. And that spiritual connection can, I reckon, and this is what makes it dangerous, it can even bypass that physical distance. So for example, Māori, or even anyone who's connected with te ao Māori who's not physically close to the environment, can really link into that spiritual connection with the environment in a deeper way still. So all of these are just so challenging and so scary for colonizers. And womanhood and femininity and caretaking and, you know, all those feminine dominated jobs, all those female dominated jobs that are underpaid, comes from all of that. That disrespect for just caring, seeing that as worthless, seeing, you know, the ethics of care, as ecofeminists call it, or just the spiritual connection that we have to one another in the environment as being inferior. It's an inferior realm. And that just works for colonizers because they don't want us to care about one another. They don't want us to care about the environment. You know, one thing I was thinking about the pay equity thing as well is that they're worried about potentially about the flow-on effects on that. Because if we do get some successes in this pay equity for gender, there's no reason why we can't extrapolate from that to then talk about pay inequity for Māori, which is, you know, an even bigger gap as we discussed. Or wealth inequity for Māori. You know, how come Māori-dominated jobs are underpaid? You know, what if we start extrapolating that logic of equity to something even more structurally damaging for the colony, that might be part of the reason they're pushing back on this, right? So
yeah, totally, possibly. But remove those who are doing the analysis, and of course, it will be a model. I mean, it's like it's settlements, it's reparation, and we're dealing with that kind of stuff with the Waitangi Tribunal, and like you say, if women can get pay parity, then yeah, absolutely, it's going to trickle on into other spaces. Everything grows, and so the only way to stop something from growing and multiplying is to uproot it. So,
boy, I'm absolutely loving these comments. Like, it just makes me feel like we're totally at home here on the stream. People talking about our veins being the rivers. People talking about our brain neurons matching the stars in the sky. That's exactly the type of conversation I'm into. We are but, just expressions of the universe. What's that saying? We are the universe expressing itself. I always loved that quote. I think that's very true. And I think those of us that are fighting to protect the environment, to protect the land and the water, are actually expressions of the universe trying to protect itself. I think that that's what we're doing. And that's what I see my role. I see my role in this society as just an expression of the universe trying to continue existing, trying to protect the life that's on this earth. And I think that that's righteous, whether we win or not. So to people who are struggling at this time, watching all of these attacks on our people, on our environment, on our women, just remember that this is the 99% of us versus the 1%. We vastly outnumber them. And that we are in a fight for truth. We are in a fight for justice. So no matter how much violence they inflict on us, no matter how much pain and suffering they inflict on our people, at the end of the day, we are the ones that, first and foremost, once we realize it, have the power. And secondly, we are the truth. We are the truth of the land. And the truth cannot be extinguished. They can kill 1, 2, 100, or 1,000,000 of us, but the truth remains. The truth withstands all colonialism and all violence. So just stay committed to the truth is all I would say. Stay committed to one another. Look after yourselves. Look after one another. I'm going on a bit of a boring rant, so stop me immediately.
Oh, that's a great little wrap up.
No.
But what was I going to say? Oh, just in terms of, we are the universe expressing itself in various ways and experiencing itself. And my favorite meme that always does the rounds, and every time I see it, I like it and I share it. It's a meme that says, I am not defending Mother Nature. We are Mother Nature defending ourselves.
That's right.
It's a beautiful thing to ponder on. And perhaps we should leave it there.
Let's leave it there. We didn't talk about the other topic of the government legalizing the incidental killing of native animals. But let's just leave it at we need to decolonize.
Hopefully our followers and our audience are able to read between the lines on that one in terms of how, we're saying we need to look after all. We mean that when we call ourselves all, we're not really about just looking after particular, as they call them, taonga, or trophy species. We're into looking after the entirety. But that's a kōrero for another time.
But you know what?
Our critiques on conservation probably be a good topic for us to talk about.
It would be really good. But the same thing that we were talking about pay equity is that the best way to achieve the well-being of women in this country is the same way that we can achieve the well-being of native animals in this country, which is by decolonizing, by giving land back, by letting Māori govern themselves. And that's when we're going to start seeing the environment flourishing. We're going to start seeing our attitude towards women changing, and we're going to see society at large changing. But of course, horrific moves from the government, totally against this new enabling of incidental killing of native animals, because it's just making it easier for more destruction, isn't it? Less consultation with Māori, all the bad stuff.
But it needs more kōrero. I reckon we touch on it on another episode. And to Kiwi Rob, who wants our opinion on the India.
we gave it.
We did. That's why I'm like, Kiwi Rob, are you just coming in here and trying to disrupt us with your partai and then not listening to our answers?
They're a homie. They're a homie.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe they missed us talking about it previously. But anyway, e hoa ma, we'll end it there. Thanks for joining us tonight. Feel free to send us messages, give us feedback about anything, topics you might want us to touch on in the future. And we'll see you in the next episode. Ka whawhai tonu mātou. Ake.
Ake.
Have a good night, everyone. Pō Mārie.
Pō Mārie.